Alright, what's up, gamers? It is the end of the month, or in fact, it is 2 days after the end of the month. I just realized I did not bring over the tab that I have my notes on. Alright, we're good now. It's time to talk about June 2025 in Weekly Shonen Jump. This was a crazy month for the magazine. We had 4 series end and 3 new series start. That's about as eventful as a month can be. Occasionally they do these kind of like periodic spring cleaning, if you will, where a whole bunch of series get axed at once, a whole bunch of series get signed on at once, just kind of setting like the next year's major pillars in motion, or what they hope will be major pillars. Will any of these last? Time will tell. But now that I'm doing these monthly check-ins, yeah, it makes some of the months like crazy exciting. We have another new series starting at the beginning of next month that we'll cover, of course, in July. But let's plunge into it. We got a lot to talk about. This is going to be like the most series we'll typically ever cover in a video like this. Let's start by talking about the series that ended, starting with the Super Psychic Policeman Chojo. Yes, alas, after a solid run of 65 chapters, Chojo has ended. Now I've made no secret, I love gag comedy. I loved this series and how it kind of, in a way, took up the mantle, was the spiritual successor to Koche Kame, one of the most legendary Jump series of all time, the longest running Jump series of all time. The premise, I thought, was very silly, very fun. The character of Chojo, I thought, was great. I thought they built themselves a pretty nice extended cast. And really did kind of everything right for a gag comedy series. I think they understood the level of humor they needed to operate at and the way to kind of build up jokes and iterate on them and come up with new wacky scenarios. Well, you know, still having a little bit of heart, just the right amount of heart where you can get invested into the characters and actually care about them as human beings, but without ever stepping the boundary of being sentimental, of being sloppy, of being saccharine. I think, you know, basically this was a gag comedy that just operated on all the right levels. It wasn't anything mind-blowing. It never made me, you know, laugh till it hurts or anything like that. It didn't have the ambition for some of the zany heights of something like Roboco. But it was solid. It was good. And the ending, I thought, was really nice as well. We had a couple, like, somewhat serious chapters that really dove into this idea of Chojo being a psychic. That could read people's minds, and perhaps could even read people's minds inadvertently. There was a surprisingly serious chapter where his partner Ponfer tracks down another former psychic police officer, that is, a psychic police officer that retired, because the burden of being psychic was too much to bear and went and lived in isolation. And that to me like hinted at another kind of level of depth in the story that they're actually going to address, you know, quote unquote, realistically. What would it be like to have clairvoyance? What would it be like to always be reading other people's minds? How would that interfere with your social life? How would that interfere with your own conception of thought and stuff? And then that was explored in the penultimate chapter to an even greater depth with a very serious chapter, where we learn the true origin of Chojo as he stands, which is this widely detested, widely mocked man. And it's always kind of like, you know, at the end of the day, he seems like a pretty decent guy. Sure, he has his shortcomings and his indulgences and his weird otaku hobbies, but he genuinely cares for people, and usually by the end of the chapter, he's done the right thing. And he's a pretty good detective too. Like, he solves a lot of crimes throughout the run of the series, and it seems like that's typical for him. So it's like, why did he become so derided by the whole town? Well, it turns out that back when him and Inukai were partners and they were on a case, Chojo mistakes a person's delusions. They, in their mind, genuinely believed that they had a weapon. I think they had a bomb. And Chojo senses them thinking, I'm gonna detonate the bomb, and then Inokai shoots the person because they think he's an imminent threat. But of course, it was just like a hair dryer or whatever. It was nothing. It was a calculator. And Chojo felt terrible about it and was so worried that he would make such a similar mistake. He first kind of exiles himself from this very frontline police work and just goes to this quiet police station. And moreover, it creates this animosity among the townfolk where they start to worry that Chojo is like polluting their thoughts. They become uncertain of their own thoughts towards him. And so they start to naturally just try to hate him because like hating him will prove to themselves that they are uncorrupted, that they are thinking truthfully and honestly about Chojo. And I gotta say, it was like a pretty harrowing chapter. Like, it was such a horrific situation, this tragic misunderstanding, and just the guilt that Chojo had felt this entire time. Like, you really felt like you understood the character better. It was this whole new dimension. And I was like, and then I heard, oh, it's ending in the chapter after this, and I was like, oh, wow, they're gonna do, like, a redemption. Like, Chojo somehow redeems himself in the eyes of the people. They come to an understanding. They don't have this concern anymore. They're allowed to like accept him. You know, all the people close to him are like, we honestly like him. We know that he's not corrupting us. I saw what I thought was like a pretty straightforward line to the finish from there. And I was like, wow, that'll be pretty moving. That'll be a nice finale. That's not what they did at all. The final chapter was another kind of like direction you can go with a finale, which is let's look into the future. And it's kind of like a time skip finale, but also not really, because what they're using is Chojo's power of prophecy, one of his many psychic abilities, to see what the future would be like. They see disturbing things. Chojo and Ponfer get married in one of them, but so then they resolve to do things differently, and then they look at the future and things are drastically different. And it's just kind of a gag that iterates over the chapter with different policies being enacted to prevent one future, but then it creates an even worse future. Blah, 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 blah. Pretty good shtick. Good way to kind of bring all the different characters back into the fold one last time. Good way to just have like a high density of jokes. A good way to kind of have this looking onward to the future feeling where you just imagine all of your characters going on with the same tomfoolery, which is kind of the most typical gag comedy ending. So it was fine. It was solid. But I was a little disappointed because I was like, I thought they had this whole emotional climax that they set up. I thought they really, like, it's kind of weird to me that it ends with Ponfer learning this whole tragic backstory of Chojo, and how it's created this situation that, like, everybody just loathes him and spits on him somewhat. And it's not that bad, but nobody's really friendly to him outside of his actual friends. Everybody else is very cautious and distrusting of him. It's like they set that all up right at the end, and you learn why, and you feel like there's a path forward to fix it. And then they just don't. It was really weird. Anyways, I'll miss this one. It was a lot of fun. The gag comedy series that we could say that has replaced it, Nice Prison, as the other gag comedy series that isn't Roboco Running and Jump. Not so good. Although it is growing on me. It is growing on me a little bit. We're going to talk about it later. Don't worry. But I think it doesn't really hold a candle yet to the stuff I liked about Chojo. Yeah, I don't know. It was fun. I like that they got the Kochikame class, the crossover, you know, meeting a true legend of Jump within their world of the series. A fan translated that, so I got to read it. That was fun. Which I think is probably the greatest honor this series could hope to achieve, is to not only be kind of spiritually carrying the torch for Kochikame, but to bring the Kochikame author out of retirement to have this sort of collaboration. So I feel like they're probably satisfied with this run. You know, it's hard to tell with gag comedy when it's just sort of run its course and the author wants to move on, and when it gets prematurely axed. Because it's not like there was a big plot stretching out into the future that we see getting abruptly cut short. If anything, that sentiment was created only in like the last couple months of chapters with the introduction of the previous psychic policeman and all of this discussion about what it really means to be a psychic and blah blah blah. That was like the first time I ever was like, oh, they're really kind of like setting the foreground for something here. They're really building up to some sort of revelation behind all of this. And then that didn't happen. But that's not enough for me to think, oh, that was a premature axe then. I think maybe they just were like, well, let's throw this in there too. Like, it's an idea they were kicking around, and they're like, but I don't really feel like actually pulling this out to full execution. Let's just throw this in there too, because I had come up with that. That's the feeling I got. I think they were probably pretty satisfied with this run. It's a very solid run, especially for a gag comedy series, which typically see the axe sooner than most. And yeah, I would give these final 2 chapters an A. Nice, solid stuff. Kind of reminds me of the ending of Yokai Buster Murakami, where they just went out on a lot of good jokes, and then we were done. Okay, the next series that ended was Sid Craft, Love is a Mystery. And this ending is certainly a mystery too, hee hee. I mentioned in the last month that I was really disappointed with how this series had turned out. I thought it actually had quite a lot of potential because I enjoyed Bokuben. I thought it was a very solid rom-com. Not like a crowning achievement of art or anything, but cute and silly and fun, and I had a good time with it. So I knew they could write a good rom-com. And it felt like at the start they really had ambitions to write a mystery series where you have these episodic mysteries. Maybe they hint at some greater conspiracy, but you really puzzle it out and you put little clues in the panels and there's some deduction to be made. And even if it's not feasible for the reader to kind of solve it before the legendary Sid Craft does, at least, you know, have it properly seeded, go through the motions. And at some point it felt like they were just getting lazier and lazier with the mystery aspect. It became less and less of a focus. And the rom-com aspect too, I just really never got hooked on. I think they focused too much on this whole, everybody's got like a secret identity, and in some cases 2 secret identities, and they all harbor secret affections for Sid Craft. And even though he's a brilliant detective, he cannot deduce any of these girls' feelings. Which is cute, but you have to, like, focus more on the actual emotional relationship and about the characters' personalities and stuff. Instead, it was all just, like, a continual barrage of, like, will Sid remember that I'm the one? Oh, will he discover that I'm actually her? And nothing really ever felt substantial. It just kind of felt like endless kind of iterations of that same shtick. So that kind of floundered for me too. And then near the end, it just started getting sad, man. They introduced a childhood friend character who's a mad scientist with gigantic boobies. And it was just totally nonsense. There was a crossover with Bokuben, which, you know, that's the right of an author that makes a successful series. You can do a little crossover with your future series. Which was fine, it was funny, it was silly, but it was kind of like, this feels desperate. This feels like a card that you should play after both series are established. Like Chojo did. Chojo waited like 5 volumes and then had the crossover with their previous series. Here it just kind of felt like such a plea for relevance, that they were really just frantically trying to throw everything on the wall to see what sticks. And then, a lot of series have ended. We can talk about kind of like types of ending in manga, especially types of getting axed. The Chojo ending of let's look at various futures is a fun one. And I think it's one that kind of has a bit of dignity because it's just sort of like, well, you know, I don't even think they got axed. But if they had gotten axed, I think it would be a pretty solid ending of just like, yep, our characters are going to go on having fun. Don't you worry about them. Whereas here, they made another very desperate move of like, oh, well, hey, guess what? We had like a whole plot figured out. There was going to be all these twists and turns and zero craft and X craft. And guess what? This girl is actually Zero Craft, but she was the one doing all of Zero Craft's crimes. Wouldn't that be a crazy twist if we had actually like set it up properly instead of just springing it on you all of a sudden when when Sid like is like, I understand it now. He remembers like 2 things. I think there was meant to be like 20 by the time that happened. And then in the same chapter, she's like, oh, I've been brainwashed. That's why I did it. I think that was a revelation, like another twist that was supposed to at least come a couple of chapters later so you could really, stir in your uncomfortableness. And then this month, they just continued the same barrage of like, here's all the stuff. And again, it felt like these are revelations that were meant to be spaced multiple chapters apart, perhaps even arcs apart. Things that were going to be foreshadowed, that were going to have clues, that instead it's just like, oh, and guess what? Also this. So yeah, we find out that Zero Craft, aka X Craft, aka Toby, was a childhood friend of theirs that was jealous of the affection between Sidgraft and Flanberry. I'm trying to remember her name. And his parents were criminals that got arrested by the great detective Sid Craft in one of Sid Craft's first major crime solves. And so he bears a immortal grudge against Sid Craft. Which is like, it's like okay. It actually kind of reminds me of some of the bullshit they were pulling in like the later seasons of the BBC Sherlock. I wonder if that's where they got the idea. That suddenly like all these people from their past were like also criminal masterminds and just cropping up out of nowhere. But like I think that can be done well, but like again, they needed time to like foreshadow this. Just anything. I don't know. Then they have like big final battle scene. Everybody's like storming the castle where Zero Craft has them captured. And then there's another twist, another revelation. Oh, your parents actually turned themselves in. I didn't arrest them. They felt guilty about their crimes or something. I don't know. It was also very stupid. I think it was also meant to be a revelation that comes as a catharsis after a moment of tension instead of just, hey, I'm going to put every idea I had. I'm going to take my big binder called Sid Craft Ideas and cram it into the last 4 chapters. It just comes across as like a little petty almost. Like a little spiteful to be like, oh, you're axing me? I guess you won't get to see all of these great ideas I had. When they're not that great an idea. And they certainly aren't great in this context. It seems again sort of like they somehow thought that this would be more dignified instead of it going out with just a very generic, well, I swear to God, someday I'll find this Zero Craft, but until then, I hope you ladies got my back. And then, off into the sunset. Nobody wants to end a manga like that. But I think there's worse things, and I think trying to spam all of your conclusions so that you don't do that is actually worse than just kind of accepting it. It just seems embarrassing. And yeah, there's a bit of an action scene, whatever. They decide to forgive Zero Craft, sure. And then the actual final chapter was better. I wouldn't say it was like totally good, but it hit such a manic pace of silliness and fun and irreverence. It seemed a lot more suitable to the series and a lot more kind of the note you want to end on than all of this crazy nonsense. Basically, all the girls like confess to him in rapid sequence. They fake out like a harem, but then they kind of like fake out the fake out. It ends with all of them fighting over him and stuff. There's a lot of gags, a lot of jokes, a lot of callbacks. Again, it's just so over the top and frantic that it actually had kind of a fun energy. I liked that even though they certainly were trying to set up the big boob scientist lady as like a fourth potential love interest. She just like doesn't show up in the final chapter at all. That was too far. But yeah, I just like that it was like happy and silly and goofy, and I'm like, all right, there you've kind of like regained a bit of your dignity, giving your characters like a fun ending at least after like 4 chapters of speed running, intense trauma and revelation and blah blah blah. Anyways, we'll give it a C plus. You know, not a great finale for the series as a whole, but it could still be worse, I guess. Next week, we saw the ending of Embers after 20 chapters. This was a soccer series that I had high hopes for because I felt like Jump was really lacking in just sort of like pure, straightforward sports shonen. And apparently a lot of aspiring mangaka think so too, because I think at least 2 and possibly 3 of the new series that are coming in, the 4th one I think is going to be this as well, are just straightforward, non-supernatural, right down the middle sports series. And I love those. I think Jump should always have at least one of those. Blue Box, of course, has great sports action, and I think is a great sports series. But it's also a romance series. It's only half a sports series, so it doesn't count. They should have Blue Box run 2 chapters per month. One about the romance and one where it's just him playing badminton or her playing basketball. Anyways, so I went into this series with high hopes. It had really weird pacing issues. The characterization wasn't great. It felt kind of flimsy. It felt like they were just kind of like rushing through a whole bunch of character development. Felt kind of like it wanted to be slam dunk with this story of this sort of outcast delinquent guy who has great athletic ability but never really knew how to apply it into this sort of team setting. But they almost felt like, okay, yeah, you get it's this kind of guy, so let's go. And in a way that just felt like strange and I don't know. I think if you go back to the videos I made when it was first coming out, I gave a little clinic on how I would reorganize this story so that it was a little more sensible and a little more impactful. But the whole time I kept saying, okay, it's like stumbling, it's weird, but clearly this just wants to be a sports shonen. So what really matters is just how well they can depict soccer matches. And if they stumble over themselves all the way to the matches, but then the matches are solid, they're interesting, they're exciting, that's fine. It's not great, because a lot of sports series can definitely do both in and out of the game very compellingly, but it's fine. And it would still be something I really appreciate having in the magazine and reading week by week. And I think that's kind of what it ended up being, because when we got into the actual like soccer chapters, especially this month as the game against their big rival team hits the climax, which of course ended up being the climax of the whole series, the way they started depicting the soccer action I thought was like really interesting. It's all like very generic in terms of how it's like structured. You know, the rival school has this untouchable prodigy that thinks he's above it all, and soccer is so boring. I kick the ball and it goes into the net. A predictable outcome. You know, that type of elitist jerk. And then our MC is just this X Factor. Oh my god, he can steal the ball even from me. I like that he was like a defenseman, you know? I think that's kind of cool. As an alternative to Blue Lock, to have the MC be focused on defense and stealing the ball and clearing the ball and stuff like that. This is an important part of the game, too. So yeah, like... There's this back and forth. They're getting each other fired up. The striker on the good guy team starts getting fired up too. He starts going through his own little internal arc and all the complexes and stuff. There's an interesting scene where the good guy team flops. They intentionally draw a foul to try to like turn the momentum around. And I was like, that's kind of interesting, because really, it is a big part of soccer, like IRL, but I don't think it's a part of the game that anybody like really wants to be part of the game. I think typically teams that go for that sort of stuff are kind of derided. Of course, the fans of that team will still be fans, but it's probably the first thing you pick on in terms of your opponent's strategies. And I think of in like Kuroko no Basket, there was a team that was all about drawing fouls, and they were like the villains. They were one of the most villainous teams in all of Kuroko's basketball. So I was kind of like, huh. I wouldn't say that I was like, that's wrong, but it was really interesting. And it made me think that they were willing to go to some places that like other sports shonen might not. As generic as it seemed, it felt like they were kind of, by doing this, signaling, hey, we're going to be looking at the game as a whole. We're not going to be using some sort of like idealized version of the game. We're going to be talking about like everything that the real pro players do, every option that's available to you on the field, everything that will actually make a difference, not, you know, in some fictionalized setting, but in the real game. I was like, it's kind of interesting. And then in the penultimate chapter, which is really like the climax of all this soccer and antics, the soccer match, when things are, you know, right down to the wire, the moment of their triumph, the moment where the enemy elite player recognizes that he lost. It was fantastic, man. The paneling was nuts. It was like so dynamic and experimental, using all of these like crazy techniques to depict the flowing nature of the ball across different panels on the page, the conveyance of speed and impact, both with like the way that like it reflected the action on the field, but then also like the psyche of the characters. I was like, damn, this is like top tier shit. This feels like they're doing the stuff that Blue Lock is always trying to do, but like better than Blue Lock, like more intense than Blue Lock, conveying more of that ferociousness, that energy than Blue Lock does. And I was like, wow, this is just electric. And I couldn't figure out if it was like they knew it was ending, so they decided, hey, this is the last chance to show my stuff on this gigantic stage, which is Weekly Shonen Jump. I want to just make the best goddamn soccer chapter I can, given that. Or if this was like stuff they wanted to kind of like sprinkle in chapter by chapter. But now, you know, knowing that they're ending, dump the whole thing of condiments on there, hit it with every tool in the kit. I don't know. Maybe they were just feeling inspired. Maybe just the way that the character action and stuff was playing out really provoked them to these heights. But man, it was great. I feel like rereading that chapter already. And then what's crazier is that the actual finale chapter I thought was like even better. It wasn't as focused on the soccer match. It was in the aftermath of that match. It was a lot more like sentimental, a lot more poetic. He has a rematch with the coach, who ended up being the coach of the rival team, but was the guy that he had met that got him into soccer in the first place. It had like a really nice sense of poetry, and then it goes into a time skip where you see it's like you would think it would be weird because we barely know these characters, but they kind of like kept it straightforward and simple, and it didn't really rely on you knowing or caring about their personalities, but just kind of like placing them in archetypes of, oh, now they're pro soccer players. You kind of just get from that context what their lives are like and stuff. And then you find out that our MC didn't go in to be a pro soccer player. Spoilers, he becomes a teacher. He becomes like that coach that got him into the game. And I just thought that was so nice. I thought that was such a nice little subversion where you imagine, oh, you know, it's, his former rivals are pros, and then you find out he's like the mega pro. Oh, those guys are in the Japanese league, but he's in the European league or whatever. But no. He becomes a teacher, and it just, I don't know, it just like made me realize there was a lot of care put into this character, even though he seemed kind of generic, even though it felt kind of like, oh, they're just going for the slam dunk kind of delinquent to athlete thing. and then they didn't really make much of that at all. I think this showed like there was some love put into it. There's this whole thing too of like that he was like a fire that burned up people's egos and left them in just a pile of ashes. But then those who are truly committed, that truly love soccer, will stand up again in his wake and be the stronger for it. I was like, oh, this is pretty good imagery, man. They're kind of cooking with this. Again, it's not like mind-blowingly original, but I think like just the slight distinction of like making that role the MC. Normally the MC is like the guy getting back up, right? Like that's like the rival character, the or whatever. Like, I don't know. I was just kind of like, they were kind of cooking at the end here. So I don't know. I feel like they had a lot of good ideas and like the meat was there. They just didn't really know how to serve it up. And the whole thing just kind of felt a little messy until it really got going. But this was a solid effort. I hope these guys keep making sports manga. I would love to read more soccer action from them. I'll give it an A+. I think it was my favorite finale of these series. Really, really solid stuff. And then the final finale, of course, unfortunately, alas, was Star of Beethoven. The star of my heart. Made it to 20 chapters, but no further. It is what it is. I kind of saw it coming. From the very start, I was like, this is too weird to run and jump. You know, they had like PBBBPB before, which is another piano series. They've had series about making art, making music. But this was just too out there. Which is why I loved it. It was so weird, so creative, so minimal in some ways, so maximal in others. The characters were weird, their motivations were weird, the setting was weird, the fact that it's literally Ludwig van Beethoven comes back to life, weird. And I never thought that it would make it much longer than this. I just hoped that we would enjoy it the whole time. I do feel like it kind of stumbled when it seemed to be trying to expand its audience a little bit. Like, they tried to almost make it less weird, and ended up just making it weirder, I think. But tried to kind of write in some more conventional plot lines of like, oh, secret agents are trying to track down Beethoven because they're investigating the supernatural resurrection, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, okay, that could lead to some like fight scenes or something, so that feels more like shonen manga. But none of that amounted to much, and obviously it wasn't enough to corral an audience that would save it from getting axed. In the end, I think it just added more weirdness to the pile to have this kind of brief, aborted plot line. Basically, these guys like show up and they're going around like beating people up and trying to get info. So you're like, wow, these are bad dudes. And then they kidnap Yaso, our protagonist, and they're like, oh, where's Beethoven? Where's Beethoven? Talk. And then they get Beethoven. He just shows up voluntarily. And then they're like, okay, we're going to let you go. Our assignment was only to keep an eye on you. And I was just like, what? Like, that didn't make any sense. It really felt like they had, like, a longer plot line planned for that. And then they were told, sorry, you're getting axed. And then they were like, oh, okay, well, forget all this secret agent stuff. We're just going to go back to the piano competition. Which I think is good. Because the best part of this series was the focus on the art of playing the piano, the art of piano composition. What does performance mean? What does it mean to please an audience? What does it mean to express yourself? What does it mean to have your own personal style? The fact that it really tackled these questions in kind of like meaningful, poetic ways. Again, it's not shonen manga. I don't know why they were trying to run this in Jump of all places. But it was really cool. So yeah, the whole secret agent plotline just kind of goes nowhere and abruptly ends. Now they're back at the piano competition. There's like a very strange, brief interlude that's like Yaso's parents' backstory, I think. It really is not explained. Things start getting like strange and abstract. We see his rival perform the Tempest Sonata. Again, I really like how they depict performances in the series. I think stuff like PPPPP leans too far into the hallucinatory aspect of music. Oh my gosh, it feels like I'm envisioning whatever. And it's like, that to me isn't as interesting as just actually talking about music as music. I think a lot can be said just about music as music. As somebody that's read Pitchfork since I was like 13, of course I would think that that writing about music is interesting. And this series leans much more into that, just like describing the style of play. If there is imagery, it's always like brief, and it's always very focused on what the sound is like rather than some like evocative sound imagery. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is mechanically precise like a clock is one thing. Oh, I am swept away to the Swiss Alps in the studio of a watchmaker is another. Right? Like, and I think leaning more towards the former is a lot more interesting to me. It's a lot more unique. I think it keeps things a lot more grounded, a lot more compelling. So yeah, Sakami, the rival, does his big performance. It's meant to be very furious and intense. There's a bit of a backstory of his character, sure. The one girl kind of confesses to Yasuo, sure. Yasuo performs, again, nice imagery, talking about the moonlight of the Moonlight Sonata, just kind of thinking of the meaning of the piece, and of course the way he plays it as distinguished from his rival. Blah, blah, blah. Really nice stuff. I could tell it felt rushed. Like, it really felt like there was enough ideas behind just that one performance scene that I'm sure if they had their way, it could have been like 3-4 chapters of just that performance scene, going movement by movement, showing people's reactions, showing people having epiphanies while watching, tying things in with flashbacks and stuff. Make a whole meal out of it. But instead, you know, it just all happens within one chapter. And then the ending is... I complained about this in Sidcraft, and they kind of do something similar here. Where it's like, hey, we still had all of these. Check out all these other ideas. Except that whereas Sidcraft had characters just shouting out all of these things at each other, Hero is like really poetic. Stuff just shown to you, like this whole resurrection ring. You just see someone in the audience wearing that ring, and you're just like, oh, okay, I guess that's that. But there's like no purpose, obviously, because the series is ending. But it's like still kind of like dropping it on you in these weird sporadic chunks as if it was foreshadowing a longer series. It ends on a really nice tonal note as well, with Beethoven deciding that he's going to challenge this new era of music and rise again to be a critically beloved, worldwide acclaimed composer and artist. He challenges Yasuo in particular. He says, I'm no longer going to be your mentor. We're now going to push each other to higher heights. It was nice. It was rousing. It was pretty insubstantial. Like, I don't know, it kind of lost a lot of the charm that I loved about it, because it was just kind of going through these finale type motions. There wasn't really that much like interesting in terms of ideas or you know, profound things that made me think about the nature of art, which this series really did do occasionally at the start. But it is what it is. I think if you've got a series that's this weird, this is like a pretty darn good finale, given that obviously they had hoped that it would go longer than this. I think this is about as good as you can do. And yeah, I don't know. I really loved it. I knew from the start it probably wasn't going to last long, but I was hoping to love it the whole time it was here. I was prepared. I liked it so much. I was like, this could be probably my favorite Jump debut of 2025. So far, I think it is, but we're only halfway through the year. There's many surprises to come, I'm sure. Anyways, we'll give it an A+ as well. Really, really good stuff. Now let's move on to our 3 new series. If I can find it in my notes. First up was Harukaze Mound, the Spring Breeze Mound. Let me check my Discord messages quick here. Make sure that's nothing urgent. Oh, excuse me. Oh, I'm gassy. Had a big barbecue today. Oh, man. Who is tagging me? Okay. Yeah, baseball manga. As I said, it seems like 3 out of these 4 series are going to be no gimmicks, no zaniness, straight down the middle sports shonen. And as I said, I like it. This was the first one of that, a baseball series. It's about these twin brothers. The one on the left, super gifted and talented from a young age. The one on the right, endlessly trying to keep up with him, to mirror his technique in pitching. Always kind of stumbling behind, but doing his best to keep up. They want to be on the same team together to play at Koishan. But, of course, you can probably see where this is going. This guy is recruited while this brother isn't. The non-recruited brother is sort of beat down and feels bad. But then this mysterious catcher shows up, who ascertains that the other brother, being a southpaw, being left-handed, should actually be throwing in a completely different style. Instead of trying to emulate his twin brother, he should lean into his own distinct style and find his own distinct advantages. I like that right from the get-go, they have this sort of like emotional story, you know? There's kind of like a psychological interpretation of this, of you can't just be a mere image of your twin. The body, you have to strike out on your own and be your own thing. It's not just about competing or following in each other's footsteps. You have to just seize your own path. That's like the emotional layer, but then they also are simultaneously reinforcing this with like an actual tactical layer of baseball and talking about the psychology of left-handed pitchers and the weird pitches they can throw and the sort of unorthodox advantage that can sometimes seize you, and this whole meta around like what types of pitches are expected versus what types aren't. And again, like, not only is that providing the emotional foundation for how this character is going to develop, it's just interesting, and it's the sort of stuff I love in sports shonen, really getting into the nitty-gritty of these sports and finding out all these interesting things about them. So yeah, they set this whole thing up, and then of course the twist at the end is that the catcher recruits the left-handed brother and not the on-paper superior athletic other brother, and says, let's you and me form a battery, come to my school. I'm trying to build up a team of all of these unorthodox secret weapons. And then he's like, all right, let's do it. He tells his brother, I'm gonna be your rival instead. We are gonna play together at Koishan, but on opposite teams. And the brother's like, yeah, bring it on. And I was like, this is just some good, clean fun, man. Like, there's no real angst. You know, the left-handed brother has like a bit of an arc within this chapter of finding himself and getting over discouragement. They immediately get to like the other side of that and are like, yep, he's good now, he's motivated, he gets himself, he believes in himself. I'm sure that's not going to be the end of that like character aspect. I'm sure that complex will reemerge. But they were quick to get to like the emotional energy that I think this series really wants to get across, which is just this like Ganbare spirit, you know. I think they just really efficiently set that up. Everybody is good-natured. The brother isn't like I can't believe you'd betray me. We were supposed to be on the same team. But instead is just like, yeah, alright. Good for you. Let's do it. It's just like, man. Good, clean fun. It really felt like a spring breeze blowing through, stirring up the staleness of winter. It's just like, this is what we need. And what a contrast with Embers, where Embers had a similarly cliche setup, but seemed to just really be stumbling over itself and trying to figure out what emotional direction do I want to go in, what scenes do I need to include versus not include, how do I characterize my MC, how much is necessary to get across what kind of character he is. And it just felt really bogged down because they weren't making those assessments correctly. They were including a lot of unnecessary scenes and like contradictory scenes or whatever. This one, it just felt like straight fastball. They knew what they were doing. They knew how to build this up. They knew what we wanted to get to, what kind of mood we wanted to be in to read this series. Just this nice, bright attitude. So far, it's not like anything crazy interesting has happened. All of the characterization is pretty flat, but, that's okay. The imagery of, like, the pitching and stuff, I think, is pretty cool. They go kind of wild, like, showing the distortion of his body when he's pitching and stuff, especially these crazy southpaw pitches he's throwing. I like that they didn't really shy away from that, I think it would be much more easy to just put the characters in, like, quote-unquote cool poses and be like, they're throwing the ball, when really pitchers do contort themselves into all sorts of weird-ass shapes to throw the ball. And even when that doesn't look cool, I like that they're still showing it. And they really got into, like, the science of pitching very quickly. How does the ball move the way it does? What are batters looking for? What is the range of pitches different batters are prepared to hit? How can you trick that? How can you go outside of that? This is like, oh man, they know what they want. Like, they have such a clean vision of what this series should be delivering on and who's going to appreciate it. And it's like, that's me. That's me. So the whole month of chapters is all just kind of like getting him set up in this team. There's skeptics. Why didn't you take the other brother? If you're such this secret weapon, how about you try to strike me out? It's good stuff, man. They framed something in the latest chapter of like, oh, this pitch is just one weapon in your arsenal. You're gonna learn more. And it showed like a RPG skill loadout slot. So I was like, oh, that's a good structure too. Every arc he kind of masters a new pitch. He's able to rise and adapt to a new style of batter. I think baseball in general is just very, very suited for manga. In the way that the games are paced, and the way that there's always this kind of showdown, this duel between the pitcher and the batter, and the way that all these other, like, kind of crazy things can happen in the outfield, There's so many different ways that every scene can go. It's good stuff, man. It's been too long since we've had a good baseball manga. So I got pretty high hopes for this. As I said, not mind-blowing, not, like, revelatory, but really solid, and just with such an endearing attitude that I'm rooting for it. We'll give it an A- to start. And check my Discord messages again. People be yapping. People be squawking. It's just a dog pic. That's what I love to see. Oh, he's in his car seat. Wow. Okay. The next new series was the non-sports series, if you can believe it, looking at this cover. Kaedegami, which is about this guy who's like a recluse living out in the forest who has befriended this demon lady who's this like demon type that I can't remember what they're called, but whatever. Locally notorious, all this evil folklore and stuff. She's always wearing the mask. Tell me, why does she wear the mask? Well, it's because her face got stolen. Then they happen upon the other demon that stole her face. I guess they infight a lot too. he receives some of her power, kills that demon, she gets her face back. She's like, now we are bound in eternal contract. Let's seek out the rest of my body parts together. And he's kind of like, I didn't have shit going on anyways. Why the hell not? Alright. It kind of reminds me almost of Monogatari, like that particular dynamic. Big booby lady who kind of rouses a depressed guy out of depression and isolation with this quest to retrieve her missing body parts. Very similar to Monogatari. And just kind of their interpersonal dynamic is a little similar. He's a bit more like goofy, shy, anxious, instead of Araragi-san's like kind of nihilistic indifference that he starts the series with. But it's the same kind of dynamic of like trying to both get excited about the world, to have this sort of commitment to one another that's really the only thing kind of dragging you out into the world. The art was pretty interesting. The lady has big boobs, so that's a plus. But yeah, the like settings and stuff were neat. The design of the demons and stuff was neat. Again, I like that it's a fantasy world. I was complaining a while ago. All Jump series seem to just be like Tokyo with demons, Tokyo with ghouls, Tokyo with zombies, whatever. It seems so rare to just have a series take place in a fantasy world, but we've been getting more of them. We got Ichi the Witch, and then Otter of the Flame, and now this. So points for that as well. I'm not really sure like where it's gonna go. Like the quest is to get her body parts back, but that feels like a little arbitrary, I guess. Like it feels a little understructured. I think that's kind of maybe what they're going for, just a feeling of kind of wandering out into the world. The second chapter, too, they just kind of head out, seemingly almost at random. She's trying to meet somebody she knows that might have information. It's all very kind of, like, vague and, like, well, maybe this is worth a try. There's no real sense of, like, an urgent, epic quest. They fight a big snake and help out this river boat guide dude because the snake was creating all this mist that was ruining his business. So there's this kind of like, we're gonna help people out along the way thing. We're gonna be endeared to humans. I'm a spooky demon with big boobs. You're a reclusive forest child. But together, through this process, we're gonna like learn the warmth of humanity or something. There's kind of some philosophy to that end. She can turn into a little chibi owl thing that's probably there to sell merch. I don't know, like these are all good things. There's nothing like anything wrong with it. It's kind of horror-y too, like there's some creepy elements, some scary stuff. It feels like maybe it's going for kind of the feeling of like early Jujutsu Kaisen. It feels like always there's at least one series in Jump that wants to kind of like aim for that creepy, unsettling, scary vibe. And it does that pretty competently too. I think just nothing about it has like really hooked me yet. There's no moments that I felt really all that emotional about. And like I said, there's not really the structure that makes me super compelled or interested yet. But I think it could be good. I think there's potential here. It's just, right now it's a little sauceless, I guess. It just kind of feels like, oh, okay, I guess that's it. So we'll give it a B. Like, we'll see. And then the latest new series is Ekiden Bros. Also, very straight down the middle sports series. Although choosing a much more unorthodox sport than is typical of Jump, one that I don't know has ever been featured as a Jump manga, which is long distance running. And when I realized it was about this, I was like, wow, that's a funny coincidence, because lately I've been really into, like, ultra-marathon YouTube content. Like, documentaries about ultra-marathon runners or particular events, like the Backyard Ultra, or I don't remember what it's called, but in Norway it's a race where you just run around a circle for 24 hours. All these, like, kind of unorthodox endurance races. I find them really, really fascinating as someone who is super into endurance art. You can just search the channel for endurance art. I have a 2-part video essay on endurance art and what I find interesting about it and stuff, and I feel like ultra long distance running really overlaps with that to me in terms of my fascination, in terms of it being so much like kind of like a psychological open question of how the fuck did they get themselves to do this? How does one will their human body into just running beyond all reasonable capabilities? And like, I used to run quite a bit. I had a few years in my kind of early mid-20s where I took it quite seriously. I didn't get like good, but I got okay. I got to the point where I could like very consistently do a 20 or a 5 kilometer, a 5K in about 26 minutes. That was like my peak, is that I was able to do that pretty consistently. And I started trying to push for longer distances. Even back then, distance running fascinated me, and I was curious to see if I could forge myself into some sort of distance runner. But totally fell out of the habit. Gained a lot of weight. And now running is not really on the table for me. It would actually be really bad for my body if I tried to run, like bad for my joints. I would love to lose weight and get back into it. That is somewhat of a goal of mine, but it's hard. So right now it's not like I think running is on my immediate horizon, but like I said, I just totally coincidentally, just because of like a YouTube recommendation for the last week or so, I've been watching a lot of this ultra marathon content. So yeah, I was like, wow, it's a long distance running manga. Obviously it's not going to be about ultra marathons. But the titular Ekiden race is actually quite long. It's a relay race that's, I think, roughly like 170k, I want to say, if I recall. And it's like legs of 10 or something. So it's, or maybe it's like legs of a marathon. At any rate, no one person is running that much, but everybody is running quite a lot. And it is largely about endurance running, long distance running. Like, that's the focus, even if it isn't as long as the psychotic stuff I've been learning about. As far as the manga itself goes, pretty generic, not super interesting. The art style is kind of weird for me too. It's like very kind of goofy and cartoony, which I think is like fine in and of itself, but in this particular instance, I'm just kind of like, it doesn't really seem that dynamic or that cool to me, and it doesn't really capture, it doesn't feel like charming to me either. I'm hoping it'll grow on me, but I don't know. The MC is like the son of these prominent running coaches and lives in the track and field dorm of a university. But he has resigned himself to just being a support player, helping make meals, helping them train, but not actually running himself. He doesn't have the belief in himself that he'll be able to be a good runner, despite the fact that he shows impeccable focus on these sort of support tasks. He does not feel like he can translate that into any sort of running success. Hey, guess what? The big revelation at the end of chapter 1 is that he can, and he runs his school 10K, I think it is a 10K, and has a wonderful time, and feels the endorphins, and feels the rush, and says, you know what, after all, I feel like I need to be selfish enough to want to run too. And I was like, alright, that's good messaging. I like it. Rousing, inspirational. Kind of an interesting place for the character to be positioned from, you know, that he knows a lot about running. He's got all these runner friends and family and resources, but he himself is kind of coming at it quite fresh. I will say, though, like, this is gonna sound really dweebish, I think. Is it a little irresponsible for Weekly Shonen Jump to be running this series? Let's real talk here, okay? Jump runs a lot of sports series, but mostly they are team sports, or at least like coached sports, you know? Typically they involve at least an opponent if not 2 full teams. And so I think any kid that gets inspired by these series and is like, yeah, I want to play basketball, I want to play volleyball, I want to play American football even. I'm not saying these sports aren't dangerous, but in trying to play them, they will be put into a system where there is oversight and guidance, there's coaching and peers. And I think once they're entered into that system, they're on their own. Well, not literally they're on their own. They have all the support. But Jump is not responsible anymore for what happens to them after that. If they get injured in playing American football, them's the breaks. Everybody did what they could to prepare themselves for that. Whereas here, a series about running, which is all about how great it feels to surpass your limits in running, about how fulfilling it is and how your life will be more complete if you pick up something like running. Not even saying that's wrong, but there's a scene in this chapter that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, where MC is practicing on the treadmill, and this kid here on the cover, who's one of the university students that lives at the dorm where he lives, comes over and is like, this pace is like too comfortable for you. You gotta amp it up a bit, and like speeds up his treadmill. Bad etiquette. And is like, yeah, if this pace feels like it's a little too hard for you, that's good. Try to run at this pace for half an hour. And then later, during the big climactic marathon thing, he kind of like zones out and unlocks his ability to like perfectly focus and accelerates at the end when he's tired. He activates kind of like a super mode and then is able to run faster than he thought he would be able to before. His fatigue like kind of falls out of his body. Now, if you try that in real life, frankly, I think probably 99% of Jump readers will fail to do that. They'll go, all right, I'm going to train like that. And then they immediately are like, that's too hard. I'm going to stop. I'm going to use my super focus ability too. I'm going to push past the pain. No, I'm not. I'm going to stop running right away. But I think in the 1% chance that they actually have the willpower to push themselves through that, they're probably just going to injure themselves. Like, you can injure yourself like really badly by overrunning. I know, because I learned about this stuff when I was trying to get good at running. If you don't rest, like if you don't have a good regimen that involves enough rest, you are going to massively set yourself back with injury. If you try to like push through the fatigue and like accelerate when your body is telling you to stop, you can like tear your ankle and have horrible things happen to you. Your body will shut down in like horrible ways if you push it to that point. If you go on the treadmill and wear the little safety clip if you're going to try something stupid like this. I know it looks lame, but wear it if you're going to try to push your limits. If you go on the treadmill and you feel like you're running as fast as you can, and then you go beep, 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 I'm going to run faster, and then you try to do that for half an hour, you're probably going to throw up. It's going to be bad for you. Like, I think, if anything else, even if you don't actually get injured, even if you don't hurt yourself, it's probably going to turn you way off of running, because, like, that is something you build to. That is something that, every runner eventually will test their limits in that way. You watch marathon runners and stuff, yeah, sometimes they are collapsing, sometimes they are vomiting, sometimes they have injuries. But those are people that have already committed to it. Those are people that have already gotten so much out of it. Those are people that are on like the other side of this mastery. To suggest that this kid who doesn't have any running experience, or the reader who may not have any running experience, end up in a situation like that, they're going to swear off running for the rest of their life. They're probably going to swear off this manga for the rest of their life, too. So I don't know. Again, I sound like a dweeb. Oh, think of the children. This manga is irresponsible. The violent games make people hurt each other. Running manga makes you injure yourself. No, but, like, I don't know, man. It just rubbed me the wrong way. Especially that treadmill scene. Because I'm like, that's not good coaching, man. Like, you don't know. You don't know. It's like, I don't know. Anyways, it's alright. The subject matter could be quite interesting. I hope they strike a balance between rousing and inspiring and grounded in reality. I hope they maybe run a little disclaimer that's like, do not attempt to do the things the MC does if you are interested in running. That's great. That's wonderful. Talk to your phys ed teacher. Talk to the track team coach. Ask them what to do. Don't just get on the treadmill and like mash speed up button. All right, we'll give it a B. We'll see where it goes. All right, those are our 4 ending series and 3 new series, and we've already talked for an hour, and we still have so many more. So lock in, gamers. Next, we're going to talk about the Elusive Samurai, which had some banger chapters this month. The last one had this whole thing with the Kono brothers, which they were hoping would be kind of the first domino or the first card in the House of Cards to topple Takauji's regime. It certainly seems like it should have dealt him a blow, but instead he twists it all to his advantage. They describe it as praying with an empty mind, where had he schemed for the downfall of the Kono brothers, it wouldn't have actually like worked out this well for him, but rather because it like happened not as he expected and he adapted to it, it was like net better. So it's kind of like, ah shit, everything we did to try to like cut him at the ankles has just made him stronger. But Tokiyuki, the rest of our elusive gang, really do have him in the crosshairs. This, to me, solidified that we're in the end game of the series. I don't think it's going to end anytime soon, but I do think we are building to that super final climax of taking down Takauji. There's little else left to do. There's, like, all of this other kind of aftermath of these battles. They spent quite a long time doing sort of character analysis of all of these historical figures in this kind of like moment of inflection, this moment of change, which I always find interesting. And then this idea where Takauji is meeting with all of his generals, and everyone in the room thinks, okay, the only thing that can happen here is that Takauji steps down and retires, and this is the end of his run. And then they say that this is truly the most miraculous occurrence in his entire career, more than his surviving any battle, more than his insane charisma winning over all of these different factions, that it was this meeting with his generals. Okay. And then what happens in this meeting with the generals is that he starts literally eating history. That the narration bubbles are showing up talking about him retiring and this being the end of his regime. And he breaks the fourth wall and eats the history bubbles. And it's explained that now he is channeling all of the godly energy around the world, and that because he is consuming all of it, Europe is going through the Black Plague because he has taken all of the godly energy from Europe, which is obviously both like historic insofar as those events were coinciding, but is certainly ahistoric because that is not what caused the Black Plague. Shocker. And I started wondering, like, what the hell is going on? Is this the author signaling to us that from here on out we are actually going to deviate from history? I thought that might be possible, but I didn't want to look it up because that would be spoilers if I just look up Takauji on Wikipedia. So I'm going to remain in the dark on that. I think it'll probably become more and more evident, maybe, or maybe it'll just be more and more insane statements like Takauji caused the Black Plague by absorbing all of the godly energy in the world. Totally batshit insane. I love it though, honestly. I think via shit like this, they have made Takauji into such an amazing protagonist. Like the aura, dude, the aura just emanates, the feeling of satisfaction I'm gonna get when they finally take him down. I think that's what's gonna happen. I don't even know. And just this crazy fourth wall breaking stuff happening so deep within the plot. Wild, wild, wild. So then we got, that very tantalizing setup. And now it seems like we're going to kind of focus in on our side characters and give them little mini farewell arcs. First up was Genba, the constantly mask-wearing prankster ninja guy with the powers of disguise. They tell him to raise these fields to try to stop the enemy's encroachment onto Sawa. That's being led by the son of Sadamune, who instead of having giant bulging eyeballs, everything is teeny tiny and spread apart. It's like he has the same features as his father, but they're super tiny, which is a great gag. Genba runs into orphans that he saved way back near the start of the series. They come up with a plan to steal all of their supplies instead of just destroying them. It's this very silly shenanigans of Genba orchestrating this chaos. Lots of fun. There's a very silly face reveal fake out where it seems like he has a goofy face, but then underneath that mask is a handsome face. And then there's, again, just that kind of really lovely step back into narration, step back into the vast historical perspective, talking about, like, who was this guy? What did the records really say about him? To what extent did he actually exist? A very bizarre ending where they talk about this local festival that actually celebrates this historic character of Genba, regardless of how factional or fictional he was. And then they're like, for some reason, they've declined all of our offers to collaborate. And then it shows a panel of Genba's drunken, naked antics, throwing poop around and shoving stuff up his butt. And I was just like, this is weird, man. But it felt like a suitable wrap-up for that character, Not that he's going to stop doing stuff, but that's kind of like his final emotional little arc where we get to remember his big motivations. He talks about, oh, well, I'm going to stick with the Hojo until I get my province. He promised me a province of my own. And just kind of a feeling of like, all right, well, don't expect for him to go on any major arcs. He's got this thing going with the Tengu girl. He's got his ambitions. He's this kind of silly guy. That's kind of a wrap on him. And I think we'll probably get a few more of these for other characters. And then we'll plunge headlong into this big finale saga where they try to take down Takauji. And it's all really good. The Takauji stuff was great. The Genba stuff was great. The series is really hitting a great stride here. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to what I think will be a very epic finale saga. Give it an A+. Man. I need some water. I really didn't think this could get worse than it had. But it did. Hey, guess what? Remember all those training arcs we had? Wouldn't you guys love to have another training arc? I know. Hold your applause. I'm sure you're wondering, will they ever actually fucking do something instead of just training all the time? I don't know. I don't. I kind of feel like they won't. I think after this is going to be another training arc. the mom of the girl that he like lied about impregnating shows up and does all these seductive things, and it's like mommy fetish stuff. And that was the highest scoring chapter for me. That was the one I enjoyed the most. That was chapter 100. For the big 100, they kind of kept it together, and it was just mommy fetish nonsense. And then they embark on this other training arc. They have to raise a baby. Whoever raises the baby best is the mother and can be with Gakuro, I guess. The baby is going to be like his new weapon. I think he already got like an egg that was like a weapon. I think that happened like a few times. But now it's a baby. They go on a bus to the training camp, and everybody wants to sit next to Gakuro. But then people start sitting on his lap and stuff. And again, it's like the really, really pathetic sort of fan service where it's targeted at someone who sits on the bus on a school trip and goes, I wish the hot girls were trying to sit next to me. Not just one of them, but all of them. That girl would be trying to sit here, and that girl would be trying to sit there, and that girl would be trying to sit on my lap, and they would all be fighting over each other. And all I would have to do is sit there and go, oh, settle down. And I could handle that. It's like really pathetic wish fulfillment type stuff that I think is very revealing of its target audience. That it's like this just really like just the pacing of it too. It felt like it wanted to be like a gag comedy. Just like the rhythm of it. But just really, really unfunny. Really lazy. No real setup or execution of jokes. Not really jokes at all. Just like the same over and over again. Well, I want to sit next to Gakuro. I was here for it. Oh, well, I'm gonna do this instead. Oh! Like, the joke is just always like, I don't know. So then they get to the hotel where they're raising the baby. Okay. They have to have a bath together. Gakuro and Senpai get into the bath together with the baby, and they're doing like really awkward, rizless flirting. Oh wait, that's later. That's later. I'm reading my notes out of order. Okay, first there's like a training arc within a training arc where he's gonna like fight this captain over and over and get stronger. This is how all the training arcs go. He just fights the same person over and over, and they just do the same scene like over and over. And then one time they do the scene, and it's like, oh, you're so much stronger. And it's like so pointless. It's so repetitive. So they set that up with another person. And then there's like all this peeing stuff. The baby keeps peeing. They pee so much it like fills up a room. And then they're swimming around in the pee. And it's just like gross. And I think it's supposed to be funny. But like, because this series is just so fetishy all the time, so much just like bizarre wish fulfillment fetishy stuff, that I just felt disturbed by all of this peeing baby, just nonstop peeing baby. And then he's fighting the hollow weapon thing he has. Now it's just sort of like a robot buddy that he tells like what to do. And again, it really felt like pathetic wish fulfillment. And I've noticed this with a lot of kind of like harem isekai kind of action stuff, that often it's like the MC is either cheat code level strong, So like all of his attacks are like kind of One Punch Man style. Whoosha! Everyone gets blown up. Or they have like weapons that fight for them, and they're just kind of like the master of the weapons, and the weapons are sometimes sexy or whatever, and they're just like a Pokemon trainer going, use slash. And again, it's like they're just trying to bury the bar as far and below in the Earth's crust so that no reader could ever be like, ooh, I can't really relate to Gakuro because that seems tough. Instead of Gakuro, the way he fights now is just being like, use slash attack, and they're like, oh, I can do that. So yeah, he's gonna get stronger by raising the baby. The baby's gonna be like a new weapon. Then they have the bath. It's like risless flirting. Truly risless flirting. What if there was a man with negative riz, where she is kind of like prodding him with her feet, and then he kind of does it back, and then he goes, you did it to me first. And it's like, bruh, like, I'm not trying to claim I'm some sort of like suave savant. I'm not trying to act like I'm rolling up in the club and pulling all the fly honeys. No. But I can do better than that. I can do better than just like like so negative riz, and then we're meant to believe that she's like charmed by this. And it's like, you can tell I got a negative bias of this series. I don't like this series. And you can say, oh, well, you can say that about like any rom-com protagonist. But I don't think it's like that bad. I really don't think other ones are that awkward, that miserable, just like embarrassed, pathetic. You did it first. But again, it's like they're trying to make it so that you never feel like, oh, well, I couldn't do that. Then the baby drinks all the water in the bathtub, and I was like, oh my god, it's more pee. I think that's why I thought this is where all the pee stuff happened, because the baby drinks the bathtub. And then the baby instantly turns into this like teenage girl character. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, well, now this girl's gonna get sexualized. They couldn't keep the baby as a baby for more than 3 chapters. Every character needs to be a sexy love interest. So now the baby is too. And that's creepy as hell. So yeah, now the baby is like a teenage Nue who is like bratty and defiant against the adult Nue. Immediately kisses Gakuro. Immediately has a scene where she's getting naked. And again, it's like, I feel like a prude, and I'm not really, but it's just like, just the fact that the series is like so bad and so full of like stupid ideas and just so poorly paced with just these pointless repetitive arcs, this stupid characterization, all these things, and then just stuffing really blatant like fetish baiting fan service into that. No. I don't give it a pass. They didn't earn it. They're clinging on to life support because they're the series that shows the most boobs and butts of all the Jump series. That is why I think it's made it to 104 chapters. And begging the overlords, please let ping pong, that debuts next chapter, be big boob ping pong, so that the fan service votes can be deviated away from this mess. I think that's what bothers me. It's the blatant pandering of the fan service, that the fan service isn't meant to be really that exciting or feel like kind of a climax of this Rube Goldberg setup, or something that this is gonna sound gross as fuck, but as like a reward that at the end of an arc there's like a bath scene or something, and it's all part of the festivities of the end of the arc, of the tone shift or whatever. There's millions of ways that fan service has been used in Jump over the years, And this, to me, is like the most pathetic because there is no point besides the fan service. There is no beat that it's hitting. There is no like way that it punctuates the action. It's just there, and it's weird and fetishy, and it doesn't have any sort of aspirational quality to it. It doesn't feel like something that was achieved within the logic of the series. Instead, it just is blatantly trying to funnel reader survey votes for showing the most skin. And then after that, they have a training fight. Wow. Guess what? It looked exactly the same as the other training fight. But now the little teenage Nue is there. And she does her attack too. So he has another Pokemon. Again, all he does is like... He doesn't even like tell her to do something. She just on her own turns into a big mouth and starts eating the slashes. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, you have to do jack shit. What is this training for? You don't even have to be here. Oh, man. Give it an E+. It was borderline just E. But the 100th chapter was less offensive. Alright, we'll see where it goes from here. I add these in a random order. Lately, that's what I've been doing. I just RNG the order. And it's very funny to me that we had Nue at its lowest point yet. Right back to back into One Piece at perhaps its highest point yet. You can, of course, You can, of course, watch the individual chapter videos I make week by week if you want to see my thoughts in more depth and my live reactions to what's happening, such as whoa and whoa and no way and oh my god. This was a crazy month of chapters. We are hitting what is like by far the most like high power level crazy fighting in the series, as Imu, who may be the antagonist of the entire series, unleashes her wrath upon Elbaf, demonifying the giants. It turns out that she has control over like an Othello board of people's souls and can flip over the pieces from white to black, making them into these giant demons with sick, nasty designs that start running rampage. Of course, this made me speculate that Luffy would be the other player and would be able to flip the giants back. But we didn't quite get there. We do return to Luffy in the underworld of Elbaf. He prepares to go back to the surface. He says 4 key words that we haven't heard in a long time, that we haven't heard since the end of Fishman Island. Join my crew, saying them to the most unlikely recipient. But as soon as he said it, I was like, I am so down. I am all the way in on this. That is now my new theory of Elbaf. Given that my old theory of how this arc was going to play out very quickly got shut down, that is not at all what's happening. Instead, we are launched into a major flashback of the previous Giant King Herald. We get to see the birth of Loki, a baby thrown into the underworld, climbing the tree even in his infancy. I don't know, man. So many badass scenes, so many awesome character designs, so many wonderful, memorable moments, lots of little funny parts, lots of great moments of characterization. I was wrong about everything in terms of how this arc was going to be structured, but I don't even care. It's just Kino beyond Kino. One Peak is here. And so good on so many levels. Like this kind of like character drama of Loki and Hadruden unfolding at the same time as the absolute calamity of Emu rampaging across Elbaf with the demonification of the giants. But then those very same giants appearing in this self-contained flashback epic, you know, like the pangs of seeing them in this state and then learning about them when they were young, when they were setting out upon an adventure in parallel. Like, it's just so riveting. It's so emotional. It's Elbaf, man. We made it. We made it. We're going to give it a P minus. This grade hasn't appeared in a while, so if you forgot, it is above S plus. I've given it to One Piece like twice before in previous months. It gets it again. And we're gonna see where it goes from here, man. This is what it's all about. This is One Piece operating in the mode that I adore most. Globe-spanning flashbacks, building up characters from nothing into like our favorites. Bombshell revelations like Luffy saying to Loki, "Join my crew," or understanding the eternal Othello game that Emu and Luffy are locked in. Moments that, like, as you're reading them, you're like, this could be historic. This could be the foundation for amazing stuff that's happening 20 volumes from now. Restart to install the latest Windows updates. No thank you. Oh, it's so Kino. It's so fucking peak, dude. Okay. I've got a lot more to say about it, but I've already said much in the chapter videos, so check them out if you want to hear me rave about how much I love One Piece some more. Okay. Now let's talk about another series I adore, Blue Box. We had a couple setup chapters for the class trip before plunging full on into this arc of Taiki going off to Kyoto. They really, I think, set this up well on a lot of different axes, because we'd already been establishing this theme of, like, they love each other so much. They've never really had to be apart before, ever since their feelings blossomed. How are they going to handle it? In the context of her moving out, but then also in this context of him going away for a few days. And I like that they're not making it too, like, melodramatic. Instead, I think it's, like, nice to kind of just show that they are probably going to be able to handle this all right. That they are going to be able to get through without any horrible feelings or any dramatic escalation or whatever. There's one really lovely scene where he's talking about all the stuff they're planning to do in Kyoto, and she's remembering stuff that she did on her class trip the year before and telling him about that. And then it just starts showing scenes illustrating what they're talking about, but it's the two of them together in Kyoto. So, oh, so nice, so nice. At the same time, obviously, because that is kind of a dramatical non-starter, I don't really think they're going to lean heavily on the drama between them, possibly at all for the rest of the series, which is fine. Instead, it's going to be kind of the side characters and stuff, having those kind of go through major moments in this whole school trip arc. So they set up a bunch of moving pieces with that, you know, Haruto's crush on rhythmic gymnastics girl, whose name I didn't write down in these notes. Ayame's relationship with her new boyfriend, her feeling of not really being able to commit to these relationships, wanting to change that about herself. Kyo feeling lonely, feeling like after all the dust settled, he was just sort of the only one left to drift. And this is what they started to plunge into in the latest chapter, as Ayame goes off with her boyfriend, and it really focuses on her internality, her thoughts, the way she's trying to conceive of this relationship, the way she's trying to grow as a person. And I really liked all that stuff. Like, I think these side characters are quite well developed. Often I don't really care about what's going on with them as much as I do the main couple. And I think because they get less focus and things need to be kind of compressed in their storytelling, there is a higher risk that things just kind of get silly and dramatic and fall into the foibles of other rom-coms and stuff. But so far, this has been good. So far, I feel like they're giving this the space it deserves. And we'll see what happens. I like that the last chapter ended with like a genuine dilemma where she really starts to like this new boyfriend and she really wants to treat this relationship differently than others. And then he's like, hey, I want to spend the whole day with you. I know you said you'd go back and hang out with your friends, but can we just stay together? And do you want to spend the rest of the day with me? And she seems like genuinely stuck, that it feels like two conflicting ideals are being tested. And I was like, I think that's a good one, man. Like, I don't think that's obvious. Like, I don't think it really is being a jerk to your friends. I'm sure they might be a little peeved, but, you know, whatever. It's not the end of the world. At the same time, it is important to make memories with your friends, too, and you can kind of have both, but if you're really having a great time with this guy and you really want to get to know him even more and deepen your relationship even more, I don't know, I think that's valid too. So I was like, oh, this is good. This is good. So yeah, we'll give it an A+ for the month. Very, very solid stuff. Enjoying this class trip arc. Next, we'll talk about Ichi the Witch. I'll check my Discord messages quick first. Oh yeah, I already looked at that. Just getting pinged. Ooh, ha ha hoo. What are they talking about? Turkey! The bowling anime Turkey is coming. Okay, Ichi the Witch. Big climax of this arc. Their most substantial arc yet. Man, I gotta tell you, I'm like out of energy. I'm gonna take the unprecedented move, just because we got a lot left. We're gonna two-part this. Never done that before. Okay, for you, the viewer, if I'm on the ball, we're right into... Hey, hello, we're back. Let's finish this sucker off, and by that I mean do like over half of it. I don't know, I usually quite enjoy just filming these like super marathon videos, not having to do any editing, getting it all done in one take, in one sitting. But I had been to the dentist earlier in the day yesterday. My jaw started hurting from all this sustained yapping. And it was getting late, too. I was doing that late at night. So I was just like, let's just finish it off tomorrow over lunch at work. And here we are. We were just going to talk about Gokuraku and Ichi finishing off the first truly major arc of Ichi the Witch, I would say. This is an arc that lasted longer than any other and might have been longer than like most of them combined. At the same time, I still kind of feel like this arc was a little underwhelming insofar as that it seemed insubstantial, maybe a little underbaked. We'll get into all of that. Basically what happened is we had the final fight between Ichi and Gokuraku, trying to knock him out of the spell of despair that the magic had put him in. Reaching out to him within that dark place, reminding him of the pillar that is family, a stake that you can pull yourself up with. That was all nice, that was all good stuff. Nothing too crazy, you know, kind of the expected outcome, emotional moment. Getting, you know, this surge of joy back in you that can overcome the years and years of despair piled on. Meanwhile, they were trying to prevent a situation where the magic was able to harvest additional despair from just like random onlookers and stuff. So they had the other witch girl distract everyone and lead them out of town. Sure, again, nice little plot point. I like that she had kind of a role in the big climax. That, to me, is like good arc writing, that all of the pieces should kind of play an ongoing role and have some contribution to kind of the final victory. But it just, again, seemed a little underbaked. It just was, like, already happening. There wasn't really any conflict or crisis that emerged from it. As soon as we found out about it, it had already been taken care of. But then, of course, Gokuraku's sister gets involved right at the end, too. The magic targets her as another source of despair, but she overcomes that as well. And it's not like this feels, like, rushed in particular. As I said, it just kind of feels a little underbaked that I think more like the opening moments of this arc should have been fleshed out a little more. There should have been a little more intrigue and mystery such that when we get to these moments where everything is like paying off, where all of these things kind of come to bear, there's a bit more weight behind them, I guess. Then, they punch out the magic. They've won. Big finale. The Baku dissolves. The whole city starts remembering their tragedies. They're filled with despair, but then relief and appreciation. They understand that they had been living in this like false dream for years and years. And it's like, again, it's good. It's good. It has all the ingredients. It has all the pieces. But I think if they just had kind of rearranged some things and fleshed some stuff out, like, basically this arc had just a whole lot of showing and not telling. Like, when they show up in the city, there's no sense of like, ooh, these people have something off about them. These are people that are incapable of feeling anything but joy. Instead, it was just like, we're told later, oh yeah, this place is actually really creepy because nobody can experience anything besides joy. All of their negative emotions have been stripped out. But we don't really get a chance to see that firsthand and wonder about it. And so that revelation later isn't like the answer to a mystery. Instead, it's just like, oh, and also this is happening, guess what? And so because of that, when we have this big cathartic finale where things go back to normal, it's not like we're really seeing that big a difference between the crowd pre and post Baku-induced hypnosis, because we just really haven't like seen the crowd much at all. So again, I just kind of feel like if they had sort of fleshed this out at the start stronger and taken a little longer to like establish the stakes and stuff, all of these moments would kind of hit harder. Like, I think the ideas are good, they just are a little underbaked. Then they have this whole ceremony where Gokuraku's sister becomes the proper queen. Then Ichi tries to recruit Gokuraku to come along with them to join their adventuring, but he declines. But then it looks like maybe he'll say yes after all because his sister comes and visits him. And I was like, oh, okay, this is like a Nakama recruitment type manga, I guess. And that's sort of been what's happening from the start, because we got the journalist witch girl showed up in the second arc, I suppose, and has been tagging along since. It wasn't obvious to me that that was kind of the structure they were going for and providing to us. And it's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Could be good. I don't know. I think this arc was overall fine. I think it was very solid. It had good ideas. It was a good concept. But it didn't really feel like they had the whole game plan down pat from the start. I think if they knew where it was going from the start, they would have introduced elements differently, foreshadowed some stuff more, built things up more, a little more substantially. I think instead, like, it felt more like they... I don't know. I'm not really sure what happened to lead to this, but I feel like Gokuraku, when he was introduced, there was no idea that he was going to be the prince of this country that's been brainwashed. Like, that to me feels like so disjoint of ideas that it doesn't really feel like they're coinciding. I think instead they wanted to introduce this character that's like jealous of Ichi because it's a man that's obsessed with magic, and men typically can't learn magics, Ichi being the exception, and then have this kind of feeling of like, this is sort of a rival, sort of someone who understands me better than anyone, someone who's also on like the other side of this uncrossable gap. I think they had this vision in mind for Gokuraku, and maybe had a vision in mind for him to be a comrade character that joins the crew and shows up in subsequent arcs. You know, he has all this like magical technology that he's trying to overcome not being able to actually use magic by implanting it into artifacts that he puts into his body. There's like all of this like characterization and stuff of him, and then there was this idea of the city that's entranced by the Baku, that's been stealing people's dreams and stuff, or stealing people's sadness. And then I feel like those two things just kind of got collided out of convenience. I don't really think they were like meant to go together. The theming seems weird. Gokuraku's character arc seems weird. And all of this stuff I think is great in and of itself. I just don't really see how the combination plays out. Like, I think this arc makes a lot of sense if if it was like much more of kind of like a human interest story, and it was about spending time in this society and then recognizing that things are off and finding an insider who's like trapped within that society, who is rebelling against it but can't convince the masses, then lending that person their support. Rather, instead, it's like Gokuraku is this like powerful, rebellious figure from the start who immediately like it introduces elements of like chaos and disruption, and then we like follow with him back into the city, nothing really having changed. You know what I'm trying to say here? Like, it feels like this whole arc could have basically happened without our main characters, because Gokuraku was built up as somebody who has this strength and this conviction in himself, right? Like, it feels kind of weird that he was like already mad. He's already trying to seize revenge. He's already trying to like take back the kingdom. There's not really an arc there. I think the Gokuraku story makes a lot more sense if it's just like he straight up is like fighting against something but can't win, instead of being tied down by these like weird societal pressures that aren't really tying him down. Like, I don't know. It's like close. It's close. It's just things could have been a little different, and that's kind of how I felt about this manga right from the start. Like, it showed such awesome potential. The world building was there. The characterization was there. The art was fantastic and there. And then a lot of like storytelling choices, I'm just kind of like, okay, but why? Like, why this? Why now? The World Eater magic showing up, lots of stuff to do with this arc, the constant kind of like fake outs of arcs where it's like, oh, we're gonna capture the mushroom magic. Oh, just kidding, that's irrelevant. Oh, we're gonna capture the spider magic. Oh, just kidding, that's irrelevant. It just sort of feels like somebody who's not totally assured of their own writing. Which is weird, because this is somebody who's currently writing one of the biggest hit manga out there right now, Iruma of Demon School, or whatever it's called. So you'd think that they'd have a little more confidence to just like plot out a whole arc and stick to it, and not have to have this weird, lurching, surging direction. It kind of reminds me of like some series that I consider much lesser, like Kill Blue or Astro Royale or whatever. Just that feeling of kind of like wandering, not really having like a sure footing on what the manga wants to be. It's just that this one is doing that stuff while also being really fantastic in other regards, which just I think makes it all the more jarring. Anyways, we're still going to give it an A for the month, despite all of that criticism. Like I said, it's like almost there. I just wish it was a little more smart about this writing and these choices. I wish they'd kind of thought a little more big picture of how these elements fit together. Okay, next let's talk about Kagurabachi. This series, though, has been killing it. This is a series that clearly does know what it wants to be, although it has had some kind of strange stumbling moments where things get introduced and then written out, especially near the start. I think there was some bet hedging in terms of how long the series would last. But now it's got all the momentum in the world. and we've been heading to a major climax as we square off both against Samura, who's like my favorite character this series is introduced. He's so fucking awesome. In parallel, the race to the Shinoichi within the, what's it called, the Kamuri something headquarters. The terrorists that are attacking that. Both of these like major climactic moments that feel as significant as anything else that's happened in the series, if not more. It's good stuff, man. I think they're really nailing this like tense kind of high budget 2000s action thriller kind of movie. The spirit of that, I think, is conveyed very well in the manga. So we start this month by focusing on the plot line of trying to protect the Shinoichi in the headquarters. I complained last month that this like plan of making various workers in that building turncoat and detonate bombs on themselves and stuff by taking their families hostage. I was like, well, that doesn't really make any sense and it's kind of stupid. And I still think so, but it's being used to good ends. I think the like tension and creepy suspicion and just the feeling of like everyone around you could be a traitor, everyone around you could just explode at any second. All of that, I think, it was being very well utilized. This like tension, this violent tension really came through. So I think that's fine. Like, I'm not the type to kind of complain about plot holes, really. Like, I complain about them because I'm a insufferable nerd, but I don't actually really, like, dock points for it, so to speak. Like, I don't enjoy things that much less if they have plot holes. As long as the thing you achieve with the plot hole is proportionally interesting, and I think here it is. Then we go back to Samura versus Chihiro. We realize that Samura's scheme, which at first kind of seemed like this utilitarian argument of, okay, well, having the enchanted blades around could spell the deaths of hundreds of thousands, millions, the entire planet, if unchecked. So let's just kill the enchanted blade contract holders. And then that's all taken care of. That's done. That's only like 6 people that need to die and then we just take this risk off the table of millions of people dying. And you're like, oh, okay, he's that kind of guy, pragmatic, utilitarian, with just an edge of heartlessness, because it's like, yo, those people are still gonna die. And it's like, okay, well, that's a sacrifice we gotta be willing to make, including, of course, himself. But then you find out that there's like kind of a hidden benevolence to this, that he had a more heartfelt, not really the word I want, like, he cares about people a little more than you expect there, because he had a plan to kill people and then bring them back to life with his powers, his phoenix-like abilities, such that when they die, the contract is severed, they come back to life without the contract, and it's like functionally the same of taking the enchanted blades off the table, but everybody stays alive. So it's like, oh, okay, I don't know, maybe just let him do that then. Like, is that so bad? Why didn't he just tell people that was the plan? I don't really get it. It doesn't seem like anyone is in disagreement that having the enchanted blades around is too dangerous. They have to already have the swords masters and the blades contained in these like super secure fortresses, super separately, so the enemy can never kind of like seize both at once. They're taking all these precautions and stuff. And it's like, hey, he's got an out. He's got a way to solve this problem. I don't know, like, what's the problem with that then? And then Chihiro kind of reveals his plan, which is that the sword he's wielding right now, the N10, was created by his father to destroy all the other enchanted blades. You use that sword to break all the other swords and then take that off the table. So it's basically the same plan as Samura's. It's just going after the swords themselves. And I again kind of had a feeling of like, oh, okay, well then let's do that. Like, what? Chihiro should just tell him that, and then they'll go and do it. And it's like, I don't know. Both of these are great plans where nobody has to die, and you've nullified, you've disarmed all the nukes. And it's like, I don't get why they're still fighting. Because Chihiro tells Samura his plan, and Samura's like, it won't work. You won't be able to break the blade. It's not gonna be able to be broken so easily. So your plan's not gonna work. But I'm kind of like, well, why don't they just try? Why don't they, like, stop fighting and be like, okay, well, let's do some experiments and see if we can break it. Moreover, I don't get why Chihiro is still fighting him, because clearly you can bring people back to life. He just got brought back to life. The contract was severed. This will work too. You're both aiming for the same goal. It's like, all right, well then, yeah, call up all the swords masters. We'll do this little trick. You're dead, you're alive. Like, you guys both want the same thing. So I'm, like, a little confused as to why they're fighting. I'm a little confused. Like, they both understand each other's plans, and maybe they have some, like, skepticism around them or something, but that hasn't really been expressed. So it's like, why are they still fighting? The real reason is, again, maybe it's a plot hole. I don't know. Maybe there's an answer to that, and I just didn't understand it, or I forgot something that explains it, or I don't know. I guess there's, like, the X factor of, like, the terrorists who are trying to seize all of the blades, but, like, you already had that issue. It's not like they're gonna go away because you're fighting. Like, it's even better if you cooperate and try to coordinate doing this, like, quickly and efficiently, rather than this chaotic infighting, basically. I don't know. I was like, whatever. Anyways, I maybe it's a plot hole. Maybe it just doesn't make sense. I think, again, that's fine, because even if this is all just a contrivance to just have these two fight, the fight scene has been awesome. When Samura's, like, backup ninja squad intervenes as well, and they talk about how they're able to fight in and around Samura. That already was, like, one of my favorite scenes back in the introduction of Samura. The idea of this blind swordsman character, of course, is a staple in all sorts of samurai fiction and stuff. And typically they kind of come up with some nonsense of, like, oh, he just somehow knows who is an enemy and who is an ally. He can sense that as well. Like, he can sense bloodlust and aggression and movement and all this stuff. He can also tell if he's a good guy or a bad guy, so he won't attack the good guys. But here, they're just like, no, yeah, he has no idea. He just knows you're a threat. He can't tell if you're a threat to the enemy or a threat to him. So he could easily take down his allies in combat. That's why we've trained so well to just, like, dodge him and stay out of his range and, like, fight in and among him, knowing that we might just get inadvertently attacked. I already thought that was so cool, and now, like, bringing back the fact that that's how these characters operate and that's how they fight, but having them trying to subdue Samura with that power. Kino, really, really good stuff. I think this series is just getting better and better at these fight scenes. They're getting more dynamic, more interesting. The visual language is getting more complex as they kind of build up how things are depicted and what sort of things you can expect. So yeah, really good stuff. We're going to give it an A+ for the month. Very nice. Again, elements of the plot are leaving me kind of, maybe someone can explain if I'm not understanding something. But it's all good. It just needs to have sick, nasty action, great character moments. Dude, oh God, Samura is so cool. It's so tragic, dude. All this stuff with his daughter. It's blinding yourself. Oh, it's so badass. Okay. Next, let's talk about another really badass series, Sakamoto Days. Where is it in my notes? Yeah, so badass freaking imagery here as they fight in the aquarium. Again, I think the strongest part of the series is just these big action set piece fight scenes where every one of them feels so different because of like the environment, the makeshift weapons. So Shin is battling against Slur, aka X, aka Mr. Takamura, the latest personality that he's adopted. Takamura seems to be, in kind of the overall power scaling of the series, the scariest guy there is, so Shin is obviously at a major disadvantage. Just sick, nasty scenes, all these corpses everywhere, just this trail of violence being left behind. And then Shin gets his shit wrecked, sliced so badly that even his speech bubble gets cut. That was an awesome moment. But then he has insanely good luck because the slash was so fast, so precise, so sharp that it quantum tunneled through him. Now, this idea of like supernatural luck that has emerged in the series since Atari, the JAA fortune teller, was introduced as a character. Earlier, you know, they had the example of throw all the parts into the bag and shake them up and proc the 1 in a trillion chance that it just turns into a gun. This is a similar one where it's kind of like a pop cultural idea of technically it could happen. And I really like these. It's definitely like the most supernatural, quote unquote, the series has ever gotten. But it was never like realistic to begin with, so I think that's fine. And again, I just kind of like these adaptations of these popular tropes of things that are possible through insane amounts of luck. Another one that I'd like to see is a famous one is the idea that at any given instant, all of the oxygen molecules, the O2, which we need to live and we need to have as a component of like every single breath we take, will just disperse through sheer chance, through sheer particle physics. They will all just ricochet in such the right way that the next breaths you take, I guess it's not every single breath needs oxygen because you can breathe in like, I think you died pretty quick if there's not oxygen in your breaths. And this is another kind of like, it's the kind of thing you tell kids to freak them out, that this is technically possible. That would be another funny one. I think that's kind of the category they're going for here. But yeah, so they counter that insanely good luck with insanely bad luck, which is that every bad guy in the New Order coincidentally shows up at this aquarium for myriad different reasons. I thought that was really funny. Again, very silly, very clever, leaning into this whole idea of good and bad luck, I think is fun. And then just this idea that Shin is in like the worst situation of his life. He manages to delay the inevitable a little bit. And then Mr. Sakamoto shows up, who was going through something where he wasn't able to fight. He was so traumatized by his store blowing up and believing his wife and kids to be dead. Kid, singular, to be dead briefly. It's unclear, you know, to what extent he can fight again, but he shows up. He takes on the whole New Order. It seems like he's prepared to sacrifice himself to let Shin escape, battling these insane uphill odds, and then finally confronting this whole multiple personality thing with Slur and X and whatever head on, saying, you are just a crazy person that can convince yourself that you are inheriting these personas of people that have died, but you're not. You're just pretending. You're just LARPing. And in response, you know, X uses one of Rion's like super secret moves and stabs Sakamoto. It looks bad. It looks like he really freaking got stabbed. I don't think he's quantum tunneling out of this one. And then he drops a badass line that he was like, yeah, if you were the real Rion, I wouldn't even have time to say these words. I would just be insta-dead. Because, yeah, I think there was a lot of people that genuinely thought something like supernatural was going on here, that somehow he was really absorbing the spirits. But I'd always believed that it was this, that he just had insane psychic trauma from, like, the orphanage and stuff. And in real life, this does happen. You can look it up. The dissociative identity disorder where intense stress and PTSD will make your brain try to separate your emotions from your memories and separate these things into clear and distinct spaces so you can leave who you were in a time of trauma behind, to put on kind of a mask that you wear to dissociate from that trauma, that sometimes does end up mirroring the personalities of other people you've met, as kind of like a way to to distinguish yourself internally. It's all very complicated, very interesting to learn about. Unfortunately, this is one of the more both like stigmatized, because it sounds like Hollywood mental disorders, and at the same time like people act like they have it when they don't, because they think it's like cool to have personas and alters and stuff, and it's like, no, there's like a real thing here, and the unfortunate people that have it are not being done a service by either of those groups of people. At any rate, I think the depiction here, and I'm not a mental health professional, but if it isn't accurate per se, I think at least it's not stupidly inaccurate. and it makes for a cool villain that has like the personalities of all these other major characters that front in different times, and they're kind of lost in the sauce of all of them. But yeah, I'm glad that it's made very clear here that it is not a supernatural thing. It is not some magical ability he has. He's just delusional. He's just deluding himself into thinking that he's becoming these people. Yeah. Really, really good stuff. Great fight scenes. The luck stuff was awesome. The aquarium setting is awesome. Tackling this idea of the multiple personalities is great. Very, very happy with this month's chapters. I think we're heating up into what seems like a big finale arc. I don't think Mr. Sakamoto is dead. That would be crazy, man. Sakamoto from the title, dead? But I do think he's going to be out of commission for probably everything up until his big grand finale reappearance. Meanwhile, you know, we got to get our assemblage of good guys back together. We got to come up with a game plan here, because the bad guys have certainly, although through coincidence, assembled and need to be taken frickin' down a peg. Okay. S- for the month. Really, really good stuff. Now let's talk about another fantastic series. My second favorite series in Jump right now. Akane-banashi. At Anime North, I bought all of the volumes that were out of this, and I've been rereading it in the physical volumes lately. What a treat, what a delight. I really think every manga fan owes it to themselves. Go down to your local library, grab some books from a cheap used bookstore, whatever it takes. Get your hands on some physical manga. It's a really different experience, I think, than reading on your phone or reading on the computer. And it's really, really comfy, you know? Hanging out with my boyfriend, we're watching stuff, we're chatting. Just the rhythm of, like, reading through a volume, going to grab the next one on the shelf. Kino. Perfect. Let me check my Discord messages quickly. Make sure there's nothing urgent. Okay. So, what was going on this month? We have this next big competition, the reunion of Akane and her rivals. She has been tasked to win without laughs, an even harder challenge than when she was told to win with Jugemo way back in the day. I forgot how awesome that Jugemo scene was, by the way, when she truly understands the meaning of her name, or of his name, and also her name, and does her performance of it in the finals, talking about the love of parents for their child. Oh, it brings tears to your eyes. Anyways, so, how the heck is she going to win without laughs? She first, in the preliminaries, goes for a Rakugo amusement park, where she shifts modes and shifts styles and shifts the emotional tenor of the room so rapidly that it's overwhelming and is like a tidal wave hitting the audience. So that they're impressed and they're awed and they're constantly being surprised by what's next. But they're not laughing. They don't even have time to laugh. And reading this, I was like, okay, this is cool. This is well depicted. Of course, the visualization of Rakugo is one of my favorite parts of this series. The way that they convey the story visually, the way they convey the audience's experience, all of that stuff. I really liked that. I really liked just kind of this exploration of the idea of a Rakugo that just bowls you over. You know, that was kind of the lesson she had taken from speaking to the chef at the place where she used to work, that sometimes you got to just convince them that what you're offering is what they really want, and just kind of bowl over whatever tastes or preconceptions or plans they had going in. But the whole time I was kind of like, this can't be it. This can't be the answer. Because when you look at the true masters in this series, oh my god, there's a little fruit fly. You know, your Shigumas, your Uraras, your Rankos. I've just been rereading it, so the names are like almost ready, loaded up in RAM. But you know, all the characters that are described as Unkanban, like the masters of the audience, people that can fill an event hall just from their presence, the people that Akane is aiming to be, they somewhat do that. They somewhat make the audience submit to their style of Rakugo. They don't just kind of like pander to what they think would be popular, but instead impose their style. But it's like a singular force, and it's like the thing that they're aiming for isn't just awe, it isn't just being impressed, but they're aiming to bring out the power of that story, right? Like they're doing it for kind of like a singular purpose. And so this style that Akane shows off, where it's basically just big bag of tricks, each one more impressive than the last, I was like, no, nobody's doing that. Nobody makes that their style. Nobody is achieving at the highest levels doing that kind of thing. And I was very happy to see that it wasn't the final answer. Akane passes the prelims, makes it into the finals, but in almost the final, the last place position, she just barely scrapes by. So then, a couple kind of build-up chapters in between. She vows to find the answer. She declares her intent to her rivals. I'm not in here to lose. I genuinely am going to try to win without laughs. We still don't know her new strategy. Shomei shows up, does some aura farming. Akane shows up looking like she's at death's door. Looking worse than she has the entire series. You know, her mom's a stylist. Usually she looks awesome. But no, she looks like she's about to pass out. It's still a mystery. We've started the competition. Zenmai went first, does a very silly Dogman performance. It's a lot of fun. I like how it was depicted. Shomei poo-poos it. Not good Rakugo, not entertainment. He makes a specific critique that I found interesting, which is that Zenmai at some point delivers a line that's meant to be spoken by like this government administrator, and he's like, that's not how that guy would talk. You threw in that line and its delivery as if you were doing Tsukomi, as if you were shooting out the witty rejoinder, but that's not how somebody in that position would ever talk. So what the heck? Is that even Rakugo anymore if you're not playing the characters? And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. It's like so fundamental that it's never really been called out in the series before, because nobody's really screwed that up before. And it's not like Shomei was acting like that was some irredeemable sin necessarily, but he was just like, hey man, you can't be slipping on stuff like that. And now we are into a good old-fashioned Rakugo battle arc, which as I reread the series, I realize there's been quite a few of. It is kind of the bread and butter of this series when it's like a major turning point and Akane needs to measure herself up against her comrades before the next big step. This is how it's depicted, and it's kind of cool because we actually hadn't had one in quite a while. What will her new strategy be? That's a great question. That's a great question that I just asked myself. I feel like she needs to still get inside with, I think it's like the Ninbon Bashi. The stories of sentimentality and heartache and sadness. There's a past arc where she learns changing time, which was one of her father's specialties. She learns it in the style of her father. In doing so, she taps into the true nature of the Shiguma style, which is kind of all about this pathos, this empathy, this warmth. And it goes okay for her, but she doesn't win that competition. And the lesson is definitely like Akane should not just be trying to imitate her father. She should be leaning more into her own nin and breaking from tradition of the Shiguma school and coming up with her own style and everything. And that's been kind of the major arc since then, that she has all these revelations of all these different ways that she can do Rakugo that's innately suited to her and her personality and stuff. But in doing so, she's kind of left behind that style of story. And I don't think the lesson was ever, oh, you should never tell stories in that style. That shouldn't be part of your skill set. But instead, you shouldn't be trying to do it just like your dad. You should be doing your own thing that could involve that sort of story. So I think this might be time she comes back to the negative emotional aura zone. Maybe. I don't know. I really don't know. It could be a lot of things. It's definitely being presented to us as a very significant epiphany, one that Akane has struggled to reach, one that's sort of like a backup emergency epiphany because her first idea didn't work to the extent that she needed it to. I'm really, really excited to see what it is. And I'm just really excited to see a big Akane performance because we haven't seen one in a while, like a real showstopper. And those are always my favorite parts of the series. You know, like Makihiro's promotion, fantastic. Shiguma's performance, fantastic. But nothing fills my heart with joy as much as seeing Akane herself perform. One other note, they ran the first popularity poll and announced the results within these chapters. I think it was like first place Akane. Obviously, great. I always say if your main protagonist isn't first place in your popularity polls, you got some soul searching to do. I think it's not that you shouldn't have very interesting side characters. Your side characters should be getting a lot of votes too. It should be, not just an open and shut case. But if the protagonist isn't making a huge chunk of your audience excited to see them every chapter, every panel, if it isn't a significant driver of love for the series, then you need to level up your protagonist. So Akane at first, and then I think Makihiro at second, which makes sense because the promotion arc was just phenomenal. And then Koguma at third, who hasn't really shown up in the plot that much lately, was a fairly significant side character, but I wouldn't say as significant as, Karashi or Hikaru or Shiguma or, I don't know, like a lot of other characters. Having him be third, I was like, this is a Fujoshi series. Makihiro at second, Koguma at third, Fujoshi series confirmed. And that actually makes me really happy because Fujoshi show up in droves to support their favorite series. And I'd always suspected that I was like, if they don't know about this one, they should be, because there's a lot of great dudes and a lot of shipping potential among the dudes in this series. And it seems like, yes, the Fujoshi know about Akane. Good. Anyways, we'll give this an S- for the month. Really, really good stuff. Very, very excited to see what's going to happen next. Alright, next we got Nice Prison. This started in the previous month, and I was pretty meh on it. I thought the comedy was kind of lazy, the art was lazy, the premise was lazy. Just was never really funny for me. Definitely going for kind of like a lol random Tsukomi routine that I think is actually shockingly hard to pull off. Like, the categories of funny random and just like tedious random are pretty nebulous. It's pretty hard to like consistently hit into the funny category, and the series wasn't really doing it for me so far. But it's kind of growing on me. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of growing on me. Maybe I'm just coping because Chojo ended and I need another gag comedy to enjoy. I want to read more than one. Roboco is great, but I need more. Maybe. But I think the direction it's going has gotten more fun. Basically, now they are moving into more of an arc structure instead of just episodic chapters about, hey, it's blank but in a prison. They're on this like actual quest to save or to defeat his dad and save the prison or something. It feels kind of like we're going Bobo Bobo mode a little bit more, where it really is trying to ape the structure of a battle shonen, but have it be very lol, random, and gag based. Still not all that funny, like still not that many jokes that really made me laugh or anything. But I think in this mode, it is doing other parts pretty well. Like, the action is surprisingly good. I think slowing down the pace of gags and Tsukomiing and just having some sequences that are still very silly and goofy, but the thrust, the punchline is about the results of the action, really kind of freshens it up. Really makes it a lot more readable, I think. It removes some of that, like, tedium and stuff. Then there's an arc, and it really is a little arc, where one of the prisoners has recreated the suburb of Ogikubo in the depths of the prison. Little Ogikubo. They've brainwashed all the prisoners there to believe that they live in the real Ogikubo. They go down and start immediately getting brainwashed as well. There's action sequences. His ball and chain comrade buddy explodes. And it's like I'm starting to see the vision. Like, the premise of the arc is pretty funny. There's funny like running jokes that get set up by this premise of everyone believing they're in the suburb when they're really in prison. And then the events and stuff. It's like all good. It's not great, but it's like all good. It's just a silly shenanigans series. There was one joke that really made me laugh, where the whole reason they were there is because the person that brainwashed everyone and is running little Ogikubo is like this brilliant professor prisoner that's supposed to like help them out. And then when the ball and chain dude explodes, he's like, yeah, I can rebuild him in my lab. And I don't even remember what he was initially supposed to help them out with, but whatever. And then he's like, okay, it's time to end this experiment. I'm going to blow up little Ogikubo. Already there was a joke that cracked me up where they, like, evacuate everyone, and there's, like, 10 people standing there. And then the Tsukomi character, the guard that's always Tsukomiing, is like, no. When we showed up, there was, like, a lot more people here. Don't you remember the scene at the train station? There was, like, 100 people there. I thought that was good. Kind of, like, a little self-referential joke. And just the idea that they didn't bother to evacuate everyone and then just went, we've evacuated everyone, we can blow it up. So then they blow it up, and the professor is like, oh, I blew up my lab too, so I can't do any of the things I was supposed to. He just, like, totally forgot and blew up his lab. I liked it. I found that funny. Maybe this is just revealing more about my sense of humor than anything about the manga. But I thought those were good jokes. And I think they're kind of hitting their stride in terms of this comedy writing. They're certainly hitting their strides in terms of these arcs and the action sequences and all that stuff. So I think it's got potential. I think it's got potential. I want to believe. They're heading off immediately into another arc that I think will be at least as substantial as this little Okikubo arc, which is fun. And yeah, I don't know. We'll give it a B. It's improving. It's improving. We'll see how high it can fly. Next, let's talk about Shinobi Undercover. This is another series that I feel like is mostly burdened by the fact that it doesn't really quite know what it wants to be. And in this month, it was just battling. They've come up with this huge contrived plot line of all these rival ninja teams that are going to fight over the assignment to look after Aoi. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Like, it seems super arbitrary, very transparently like, well, we want to have a bunch of ninja on ninja fighting, so how about this? And that's fine. The whole thing is that they're not supposed to, like, hurt each other exactly. They instead need to break the tags that each team is holding to score points. That's also, like, fine. I think the rules, something about it, my note says the rules don't make any sense to me, lol. But I don't really exactly remember what the rules were or why they didn't make sense to me, so maybe it was actually fine. So they establish all this, and then the rest of the month and going forward, it's not even over. Just fighting, fighting, fighting. But that's fine. The Kekai stuff, that some of these ninja have supernatural powers, they have devil fruits basically, feels kind of dumb. It feels kind of underdeveloped. One thing that I liked about this series from the start is that it leaned very heavily into, like, ninjutsu, ninja technique, which of course is supernatural really, but it all kind of falls under the established tropes and abilities that a ninja ought to have. You know, substitutions and shadow clones and decoys and disguises and blah, 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 blah. And I always really like that stuff. I think that stuff is so much fun. I love fights between ninjas where they're just kind of parrying each other's techniques back and forth. The early days of Naruto were filled with this stuff, and I loved it before they just started summoning giant monsters and having them shoot Godzilla blasts at each other. There's, like, in the heart of Kunoichi Tsubasa, this random, silly rom-com series. It's sort of a rom-com, slice of life series. It has a lot of, like, little ninja action sequences. I love it. I loved Raizu and Shinobu in One Piece doing all of their ninja arts. And it's like, I think that's still fertile ground. I think just with kind of, like, the basic ninja skill set, you can do a lot of really interesting stuff. And it felt like the series was gonna, like, commit to that. And now they're like, oh, well, I also have the power of electricity. I have the power of stretching. It's like, But whatever. Aside from that, the fights are actually pretty good. The choreography is good. There's good creativity. They still do a lot of, like, ninja arts and stuff. It's good. The pacing seemed a little weird. It seemed kind of dragged at points. We're kind of being asked to care about the struggles of the side characters, and they're having little arcs and overcoming stuff in these battles, which is fine. Like, that is what happens in Battle Shonen. But it feels a little underbaked. It feels like they could have made this a lot more kind of dynamic and exciting if they were willing to pick up the pace and gloss over some of these things. There's some of the character moments landed for me. In the most recent chapter, we get into Umineko as a character, that his older sister is way, way, way more talented than him, and that her attitude was like, because you are talentless, I am doing you a favor by, like, snuffing out your ambitions so that you don't struggle and fail. Of course, that's not how he sees it. And I was like, alright, that's kind of like an interesting dynamic. Fighting. In the previous chapter, the guy that Yodaka, our main character, is fighting, does, like, a blatant distraction where he's like, Aoi is over there, and then he, like, freaks out and eats an attack because he got tricked, because he's stupid. And it's like, that, no. I get that that's supposed to be kind of like his character, is that He's like insanely good at fighting. He's like a prodigy of just one-on-one combat, but his brain so easily gets overloaded by considering like anything beyond that. And it kind of ties back into the fact that he was never meant to socialize with Aoi in the first place. His role was just to be this like secret weapon lurking in the background, and so it's kind of like this fundamental flaw in his character, this mismatch, is being exploited. It's like pretty good, but it's so bland and flat that it's exploited by him just going like, she's over there, and him like instantly completely falling for it. Like, I feel like that could be done in a more interesting way. Because here, even though it's like part of a big character moment and a big character arc and stuff, it doesn't feel like it, because it just feels like he's unrealistically stupid, you know? And it's not interesting. Like, him having that weakness, I don't think is that interesting. I think it could be explored in a much more interesting way. But yeah, it's all fine. Give it a B as well. I think this is one of the modes that the series operates best in, when it's just fight, fight, fight. But, you know, it is what it is. Like, if it's just another month of this fighting, I'll probably get tired of it. It feels like we're hitting the climax, though there's not much left to do in this little arc. And it's like, where do they go from here? They established that, like, league of evil, villainous ninja, and then I guess we're gonna fight those guys one by one. Nothing terribly exciting. Again, like, the future of this series feels like there's nothing really enticing me. There's nothing that I'm looking forward to seeing, just because everything feels a little underbaked. But it's all right. Okay. Kill Blue actually had some kind of interesting stuff this month. This is another series that I'm usually kind of down on, that I usually say is not really sure of what it's doing too many things, doing too many weird things. And this month didn't really start strong for me. They're just doing this airsoft battle. This idea that Noren has the natural skills of an assassin. Sure, whatever. There's some kind of cool moments, some good little action sequences, some kind of tactical stuff, but nothing really that interesting. And this whole dynamic of like Ogami has to pretend he's bad, I think was not really that fun either. It just kind of felt like we were being deprived of what makes him the most fun as a character. I don't know. None of it was really all that great. Although I did feel like the theory I have that Noren also is an adult that's been de-aged, just like Ogami. I feel like maybe that's back on the table with just the way they characterized her at the beginning of this arc and her capabilities and stuff, and the fact that it feels like she has this mysterious pool of experience she's drawing upon. So that was kind of satisfying, because I felt pretty committed to that idea, and then they did some stuff that felt like it was going against it, like her having a crush on Ogami. So I'm still kind of like, how are they going to square all these circles, man? But we'll see. And then Ogami squares off against the president. And before I was kind of like, the scene where they first have their duel, Ogami and the president gets just like schooled. I was like, oh, okay, I think I kind of know what sort of character they're going for here. But no, I was wrong. The gimmick with the president isn't that he's not particularly good at stuff, but he still manages to command this elite following. It's that he's not particularly good at stuff, but he's a genius of hard work. And that he will take any skill that he's not good at and just grind it until he can beat the people he lost to again. And that the way he's able to do this with skill after skill after skill is that he doesn't sleep. That he has some sort of weird condition where he barely has to sleep a couple hours per night. And I was like, that's kind of neat. So he contrives the situation where they cut off the camera feeds and is like, okay, Ogami, you can quit pretending to be a loser. You can unleash your full skills. I know you're a hitman. And I guess he's okay with it, which kind of confused me, but whatever. Let's actually have a fight because I've gotten better. And then they have this epic duel, which itself was like pretty good. I think it was some of the more interesting stuff in terms of like this gunplay. I really liked the scene where Ogami seems like he's lost because the president has his gun, but then Ogami exploits the weakness he has of having two guns and not being able to do anything else with his hands. It's a nice little moment, some nicely choreographed stuff. Um, and we learn like the backstory that the president was bullied and he just learned how to fight and fought his bully over and over again until he finally won. And him just going, that was the best feeling in the world. And I was like, they kind of got me with this one. We also find out that the thing that motivates him so much is his love for Narishiko, who's like the giant girl with a giant personality. One of the members of the student council. I really liked her design. I really liked the stuff she was doing. So I think it was neat because that kind of character is often like a joke character, Not that they don't try to give her her own appeal, but like you never really see her as like a romantic lead in any context, that sort of archetype. So for them to just explicitly be like, oh yeah, her and the president are actually like mutually in love with each other. They have these secret crushes on each other, and they've been supporting each other this whole time. I was like, that's cool. I liked that too. That felt like a very nice change of pace. So yeah, the arc finishes, the home ec club wins, the student council promises to leave them alone for now. Ogami reveals in part his motivations for trying to become student council president to the current president, who like respects his honesty and respects that he's straight up about, yeah, I just need to do this for like an auxiliary reason. It's nothing to do with actually wanting the position or wanting to make change. Again, it just all kind of felt like fresh. They was moving in interesting directions, unexpected directions, but like coherent directions, ones that feel like they were moving towards actual plot resolutions and not just kind of aimless wandering. The aftermath of the battle, they go to a bath. There's some like bath fan service stuff, but nothing too crazy, nothing too excessive, which is nice. Overall, I'm like, that was a pretty okay arc. That was pretty solid. I kind of, the student council characters really grew on me. I feel like this is the series playing to its strength, playing to kind of the attitude they had in Kuroko no Basket, this author, of just introducing casts of extraordinary big personality people and then just having our heroes kind of collide with them in interesting ways. That way, it was often basketball. This way, it's airsoft, whatever. But a similar sort of feeling where those personalities and those compatibilities get exposed during competition. So yeah, I have no idea what's next. The president is straight up like, yeah, you're a hitman, so I can't let you be my successor, which is fair. I don't know why he's not saying, yeah, you're a hitman, so I'm going to arrest you, but whatever. Yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen next. The overall direction of the series remains mysterious to me. Like, they beat the evil principal guy, but he's still, like, there, and they're gonna stop allowing people to do the challenges with Ogami to win over Noren. I still don't really know, like, why they're doing anything they're doing overall, like, in terms of storytelling. But whatever. Ogami is going to continue trying to win over the student council, I guess, is what's going to happen next. We'll give it a B+ for the month. Solid stuff. Okay, what's next? Hima-ten. Hima-ten, kind of decent this month. I've been kind of waxing and wavering on my feelings for this series. I think at some point it shows a lot of heart and shows a lot of respect for the characters. It's really focused on the interplay of very sensitive feelings and stuff, which is what I like in a rom-com. At other times, it's very stupid. Very cliche rom-com stuff, fan servicey, wish fulfillment-y, just dumb. And I think most of the time it's going to be falling in between, somewhere in that spectrum. Here we had the cultural festival arc. That's something I was excited for. I always like a good cultural festival. I think it's just a very fun setting where you can have a whole lot of different stuff happening. Great way to kind of involve all of your cast. I think it went all right. Fun stuff of Imori's sister showing up. This whole fashion show mix-up thing that Kana has to go on with Imori. A little contrived, a little silly, but fine. They took it as an opportunity to really develop her character, though, like the complex she has around having a crush on him, but knowing that he spends a lot more time with the other girls and feeling like she's getting left behind. Sure. Then there was Himerin's focus, where she goes on a normal school festival date with Imori because she's not allowed to flex her celebrity status and draw a bunch of attention to herself. So instead, they just kind of go around and look at booths, and I think they do a stamp relay. It's fine. It feels a little hurried. It feels like they were just kind of like ticking the school festival boxes, which is, I think, better than not doing that, because that way you really do kind of reveal this whole like mode and stuff. But I feel like could have given that a bit more time to breathe and had more of an opportunity to explore Kana's feelings at different points instead of just having this like montage and at the end she's like, this is how I feel about it. But they are really taking the character's emotions seriously, which is great. Then we have Kanai's turn. They all just have their turns. Her little arc is that she was performing as an idol. Very silly. They talk about how she had auditioned to be an actual idol as a kid and like made it past one round. But then she's like, I couldn't have never ever done it because I have a crush on someone, which is just very suddenly very revealing of all the grotesque nature of idol culture in Japan. But of course it's not focused on that. That's just taken as granted. That's just taken as a fact of reality, as true as the ground we walk on, which is whatever. But yeah, she admits to Imori that she has a crush on someone, and I think her plan was to just straight up confess her love to him. But then a convenient interruption happens, of course. Someone shows up and she runs off, and now, of course, Imori is like, I don't know who she has a crush on, and Himerin tries to steel herself to... She realizes that she was talking about Imori, and all the pieces fall in place for her, and she's like, I gotta make my move soon too. So this kind of marks like a turning point where now this like misunderstanding, this ambiguity is in the air. And so far the characters I think have been like pretty smart, pretty emotionally intelligent. And it would be stupid if Imori goes like dozens of chapters without ever once considering and convincing himself that it's actually pretty likely that she was talking about him. I think they have to move decisively on this and have him come to that understanding sooner than later, because otherwise it's just very unrealistic and very tedious. And I think the series is better than that. Will it happen? I don't know. Time will tell. Time will tell. And then this idea of Himerin kind of steeling herself to make more of a major impactful move. I like the scene where she's feeling down on herself. She feels like she's maybe already lost her chance. And then she sees like a big billboard with her face on it. And she's like, who the hell do I think I am? I'm a girl boss. I'm the CEO of a company. I'm rich. I'm famous. I'm wealthy. I'm queen of the world. Why am I just conceding this? Why am I giving up? And I was like, yeah, right on. Like that to me is like what makes this series unique, is that that's one of our leading characters is the superstar. So like, yeah, that should be a factor. That should be a factor in her psychology at least. So I don't know. I wanna believe that this will go well. I wanna believe that they're gonna execute on this sensibly and have the characters respond with emotional intelligence and not be story convenient dunces for indefinite periods of time. But it definitely feels like a crossroads. And I think what it comes down to is, do they want this series to run for 300 chapters, like some rom-coms of the past? And if so, then yes, there is no ceiling in how dumb a character can be in order to delay a confession. Or are they content with this series running for maybe another dozen chapters or so, really exploring these things, having some conflict, having some confrontation, getting to the heart of everything, and having like a nice, satisfying conclusion before things get so painfully tedious? And I hope it's the latter. But everybody likes to make money, and if you do the former, you'll make a lot more money. So we'll give it a B for the month. Nice stuff. A little underwhelmed by the school festival aspect, as I said, but not bad, not bad. Okay. Next, let's talk about Witch Watch. Last month, we had Nico grow into a teenager and explored all of the awkwardness and her re-emergent crush on Morihito, and just that overall at once creepy but heartfelt but brilliant storytelling concoction, which is like the lifeblood of manga itself. This month we didn't focus on that so intensely, but it is going to be probably the recurring theme going forward as Nico is at this stage of her life. So we started with a very silly, very episodic chapter where Morihito goes on another mixer with, what's his name? Kansai? And Morihito gets a spell that makes him act cool, which is very, very funny. He just acts like super obnoxious and lame, and it doesn't go over well. And then our Tengu friend, whose name I think is Kansai, but that actually sounds wrong, gets hit with a spell where all of his responses are delayed by one. So if he tries to respond to someone, he actually responds to the previous thing he meant to respond to, and it's like, that's clever. That's a recipe for disaster there. And they do a great job building up on this and escalating it and coming up with all these good little moments where you can kind of foresee how it's going to turn out so poorly. And then you just get to watch in horror. Really great stuff. Very fun. I like this sort of standalone disaster chapter. Then there was a really fun one where Nico has been bragging to her classmates that she has these elite bodyguards looking after her. It's the Witch Watch, you know, that's what the whole series is about. She goes on like a little date with this girl. They go shopping, and all of the guys have riled themselves up into competition, trying to prove that they are actually the best bodyguard. They're the ones that are keeping her the most safe. And so each of them rips off a famous bodyguard from different movies. They're all playing like different types of bodyguard shtick. It's totally incongruous. It's totally silly. None of them are being at all subtle about it. Nico, of course, is just getting embarrassed. But then there's one pretty badass scene in the end where Nico is actually in like a small amount of danger, and then suddenly they're all doing like cool poses around her. And there's comedy because it's like the juxtaposition of all these different bodyguard cliches playing out at once. But it's like genuinely pretty badass too, and I like that they struck that balance. Next was a chapter so typical of this series that it seems to be almost self-parodious. This author loves mysterious food that has been enchanted either via magic or science into making you do something different or transforming you in some way. Sket Dance was full of it. Witch Watch is full of it. In this one, there's 6 different cookies that all have 6 different effects that 6 characters eat and get pulled in 6 different directions. And the whole chapter is them trying to figure out, what are these effects? How did they get fused into the cookies? mistakenly through Nico trying to express her feelings in the cookies. And then they have to come up with what cookie would have the opposite effect. But of course, it's not true orthogonally opposite. Instead, it's tangentially opposite. So they just take on another effect. Really good stuff. Very, very silly, very fun, totally pointless. Then at the end, we kind of get back to this core plot line of Nico having a crush on Morihito. We learn that Morihito is actually very, very popular in school, that all sorts of girls have been trying to confess to him. Which makes sense, just with the way the character is written. It's like, yeah, that guy would be popular. So Nico, of course, becomes very self-conscious about that, very insecure, very worried that somebody's gonna steal him away. She comes up with all these schemes to try to like understand his feelings or to become more endearing to him. And then they point out that she tried all of that stuff before she got de-aged. These were all chapters from early on in the series. I thought that was great. She comes up with like a new ill-conceived scheme to wow him, which of course is a disaster. And then we find out at the end, though, and this is kind of the plot point, that she has to go live with her mom for a month to kind of readjust to her awakening magic powers. Her mom lives in like a witch village, so she'll be able to get more support there. And Morihito, of course, gets confessed to at least once a month, is what she was told. So she's convinced that he will be taken by the time she returns. And it's presented as kind of like a plot point and a dilemma, and it's like, how will she navigate this? It's interesting because, of course, the reader knows there's no chance in hell that Morihito is going to get a girlfriend. We know that that's just her insecurity and her delusions. So it's kind of like, well, what absurd lengths is she going to try to go to prevent this? That'll be interesting. That'll be fun. And, of course, the actual plot point itself, I think, is quite interesting. I'm excited to see the village of the witches and meet all these characters and meet Nico's mom and stuff. Kind of like a subtle running joke in this series is that all witches are actually really clumsy. And it may be that, like, the witches there, it's just this entire society of clumsy people or something. I don't know. We'll see. That does seem like something the author would enjoy. There's a family and sket dance where the entire family is clumsy. So it might be kind of like a similar shtick. I can imagine it being like Morihito goes with her or something, so we get like a straight man character involved in that mix too. But all of this is to say, like, all of that stuff is good and makes sense, but it's weird that we're kind of being presented this as like a crisis when we, the reader, know there's no element of crisis here at all. I'm not really sure what we're meant to make of that. Anyways, good stuff. We're giving it an A+. Series basically always gets an A+ for me. I love it. I can't wait for more. Next, we have the Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi, which is still running. We had 4 series get axed this month, but Kiyoshi was not one of them. And lately, I think I talked about this last month too. I'm having some cope. I'm having some hope that there may be more. That this may actually, in fact, just be one arc, and then things will keep going further. And I don't really believe. I want to believe, but I don't really believe, because it really feels like we're building up a finale. You know, they did say Ashura Roth is one of only 3 supreme demon lords, but there are 2 more. So even if this ends with his defeat and the defeat of all of his cohorts and all of his armies, maybe that's fine. Maybe we'll just go on and fight the next one. But that's kind of hard to imagine too, because like every single character that's been introduced has had like an arc in this fight, has overcome everything in this fight. And what else will they do in those future arcs were they to exist with these characters? Are we just going to introduce a whole new cast of characters? Kiyoshi goes to live somewhere different and meets a new mentor, a new rival. The cast just gets filled out again from ground zero, and they get to have new arcs and stuff. Like, that is an option, but that feels really weird too. Because, yeah, I don't know. Like, this month, it's not over yet, but it feels like it's getting close. Tsurugi beats the first Demon Lord. That was awesome. Great fight scene. Kiyoshi and Ashura Roth continue fighting, but then the rest of the month really focuses on Sakaki fighting against Yuta, the human that was corrupted, that instigated this whole thing, and also fighting against the second Demon Lord. I can't remember the ordering, but another really high-ranking Demon Lord. He's having conflict because he knows Yuta's past. Yuta has this tragic backstory of a very selfless nun who gets killed, convincing him that humans aren't worth saving, that for all the evils of demons, humans are even more evil. It actually gets kind of heavy during that, but it's like, how can Sakaki kill him? Awesome gambling power, you know, he has the power, he has to roll dice, and that determines his weapon. Really cool stuff there, really awesome fight scene. In the end, he feels like he has to kill Yuta, but then stops at the last minute, sacrifices himself, telling Yuta, I'm entrusting you with the power to end this. Yuta betrays the demon, but then sacrifices himself to save Sakaki. It's good stuff. It does feel kind of hurried, like all these plot points are happening just kind of like back to back to back to back, which again makes me feel like it's probably ending soon. But then again, if it is going to run past this arc, it also kind of feels like, okay, well, let's get to the end of that arc. I don't know, man. It's crazy. It's really all over the place. In terms of whether I think it's going to keep going or not. Most signs point to not, but occasionally there's a sign that points to maybe more. And I want to believe in those signs. I really love the series. I love the character designs. I love the fights. All these things I've been praising the whole time. It really is such a dark horse. I never would have thought a series with a name this generic would make such an impression on me. It's made it to a year. It had its big 1-year anniversary celebration. It made the cover, I think, when that happened. Clearly, there's people there that love it. It got the Oda seal of approval, which isn't that common, and typically foreshadows great success. So I feel like there must be a constituency of decision makers that would be happy to see this keep running. And now I start to wonder, is it actually Usui Sensei who is like, okay, no, this is enough. I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe it won't get axed. Maybe it's just going to come to a natural end, and maybe that will happen soon. I don't know. At any rate, we'll give it an A+ for the month. Really solid stuff. I hope there is plenty more. Next, let's talk about Oter of the Flame, another quite new series that started last month. I was very, very impressed with it off the jump. I loved that it was a fantasy world. I loved the character design, the art design, the impact of the fights, this whole flame and philosophy and everything. And then somewhat like Ichi the Witch, I kind of felt like they had all of the ingredients and then they aren't really moving decisively. They're not really acting confident. And we start with them getting trained, and I talked last month about how, okay, this is actually pretty common these days where you have the character kind of embark in this largely skipped over training arc, such that even though you've seen the origin of the character, now you can be surprised by how powerful they are later. Like that there's a space of ambiguity where the character could get arbitrarily strong and sets up these surprises and stuff. And it seemed like they were kind of going for that, but then we saw so much of the training. Like, this training arc goes on for 3 of the chapters in this month, which means it went on for like 5 chapters total. And they're getting really deep into the mechanics of the superpowers of this series, heroic vigor and stuff. And they're really harping on about the philosophy of warriors, and should Oter be fighting to have a heroic death, or should he just be fighting to live? And what are his true motivations and stuff? And it feels kind of like putting the cart before the horse. Because, like, why are we spending so long doing this now when we should be, like, hitting the ground running? all of this stuff could be flashbacks. All of this stuff could be that we just follow him. All right, you're going to need training from a legendary warrior hero. Now it's a week later. Now it's a month later. Now it's a year later, whatever. You're about to embark on this dangerous campaign. Ooh, I'm at death's door. I'm going to remember my training. I'm going to remember my motivations. And then you flash back to these conversations. You don't have to do all of this in sequential order. It bogs down the plot quite a lot. Anyways, the training stuff, it didn't do a whole lot for me. Not that it was really that bad on its own. Like, I think the power system in the series does seem good. Like, it seems not that interesting, but it's fine. And all of this philosophical stuff about what it means to be a warrior and dying a virtuous death and blah, blah, blah. All right, that's fine too. Not like mind-blowingly interesting, but fine. But it was just like, get on with it. Like, go do something interesting. Why are you spending half a chapter like talking this early on in the series? And then they finally did. They set off to catch up with the hero that was training them, to kind of join the campaign in the north. There's a little mini adventure here where they save a village that has been overrun by ice demons. Pretty solid stuff, you know. The fight scenes are still quite good. There's a scene where it seems like the guard is doing the classic trope of like bragging about their schemes and their powers and how puny and insignificant you heroes are. And then they're like, oh, that's good to know. You actually just gave us a whole bunch of like useful information. I thought that was fun. So they were like kind of cooking through there a bit. Like I did really enjoy those chapters. And then we get to what looks like it's going to be the first substantial arc. This Dwarven forge that exists up in the north. The dwarves have been enslaved and forced to create weapons for the ice army. Their great forge has been frozen over. There's an iron spirit that dwells within it, just like Oter's fire spirit. They can communicate via the spirits. They have to save the iron spirit. I liked the setting of this. I liked the big forge that's covered in ice looked badass. The world building here, that there's all these different elemental spirits that Oter may be freeing or even collecting and using to empower himself, or who knows where that will go. But it's good world building. Like, that makes me even more curious about the world out there and what they're gonna meet. The dwarven craftswoman that they meet is a fun character. I'm looking forward to her moment of catharsis and triumph. You know, you really feel bad that her way of life has been ruined. There's a brutal scene where like the ice demons have hung dwarven bodies, and it's like, oh, that's the greatest dishonor to them. You know, for them, it's about being buried in the ground. So just these themes of like death and ritual and respect for the dead and how to have a meaningful death and blah, 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 kind of re-emerging with the Dwarven society. I thought that was all very cool too. So it's like solid stuff. They're really getting the chops of it. I hope this arc goes well. I hope that they don't get too derailed and too bogged down again. It really is like Ichi the Witch, where I think like all the ingredients are there and all the ingredients are good. It's just some of the storytelling decisions, I'm just kind of like, you know, you don't have to do this, right? you know, you can do this differently, right? Like, it just kind of feels like they're falling into, and it's like, far be it for me to say these things, because the way weekly manga works is you basically got to be like firing off the dome, and you don't really have time to kind of sculpt a story and then re-sculpt it and readjust multiple times to have perfect alignment towards your goals. Sometimes you just got to run with it. Hey, I think we'll do a training arc. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. How much of it will you show? I don't know. All of it? Like, that sort of thing does happen in manga. And I think it can sometimes produce really great results where things just kind of like fly off in a direction that nobody could have anticipated. Not even the author really could have anticipated. And that can have tremendous results. But in other cases, it just kind of leads to storytelling that I'm just like, All right. No. But yeah, it's good. I think it's good enough. It's enough that I'm intrigued to see more. We're gonna give it an A for the month. I think it's still starting quite strong. Very curious to see where it goes. Finally, let's talk about the champ of last month. Roboco beat the odds, beat all patterns, and outranked One Piece in the last month's video with its fantastic set of chapters about the alternate timeline Robocos. Assessing this month's chapters, I realized that, like, this review format, which of course I take very seriously, and everyone else should too. No, just kidding. But one flaw in it that I hadn't really anticipated is that the varying numbers of chapters per month actually really disproportionately favors some series over others. Series that have like longer arcs that can stretch across the entire arc, or stretch across the entire month, I think it's easier to maintain like a consistent high opinion from me. Whereas like gag comedy series, where most stuff is like episodic, there's always going to be kind of like a return to the mean, right? Where if you have extraordinarily funny chapter, or even a very extraordinarily funny multi-chapter arc like we just had here, it's only ever going to be followed up with just kind of normal episodic stuff. And that can be like really fun stuff, but it's not going to be able to just consistently keep hitting those highs as you would if you were just telling an amazing story the whole time. You know what I'm saying? So the month that Roboco excelled, only 3 chapters. and that was the perfect length because all 3 chapters was fantastic. Here there's 5 chapters to talk about, and they're all quite good, but it's not going to be able to hit those same heights. Poor Roboco. I mean, really, like, if I really wanted to make this fair and accurate and get into that depth, I would be making these videos every week. I would just be making one after each issue, just talk about each chapter, give each chapter a rating. But then I think it's like, that actually starts to feel unfair for the more story-driven series, because sometimes in the middle of a great arc, there will still be chapters where it's like, yeah, not all that much happened. They just kind of moved forward on this. But it doesn't like deteriorate the quality of the arc at all. It just means that chapter totally standalone, I probably wouldn't give that high a grade to. And also, that's too many videos. I don't have time to do that. I did think about it. I think if I had infinite free time, if I was unemployed, say, maybe that would be enough of a difference maker. But I don't know. I prefer talking about it month by month, because then I feel like I have more of substantial stuff to talk about, and I can kind of talk about the general direction of a story, and it's not just super reactive to like 15 pages, 20 pages every single time. Anyways, whatever. Poor Roboco, whatever. What did they do this month? It was still really good. We had the ending of that arc that I talked about with the alternate universe Robocos. The punchline to that I thought was fantastic. They basically want to kill Gorilla because it's like the canonical event, like Spider-Man, that Kagurabachi has to die in every single me and Roboco timeline. So they all just like take turns trying to kill him, but he can't die through a wide variety of very silly coincidences. He is unable to die. And they can't figure out why they can't kill him. And they also can't figure out why the timeline isn't collapsing even though he's still alive. And then the big reveal is that, well, he already died once and came back to life, so it's actually all okay. We've already had the canonical event. I thought that was great, because that was a chapter. That was like quite a long time ago, but there was the chapter where Kagurabachi dies and has to come back to life. And I think that's really funny, because that chapter, the joke at the time was that it was so inconsequential, and it just kind of happens, and then he gets better, and it's all good. But now they're like bringing it back and being like, no, that actually did have an impact on this totally unrelated thing way later. That's great. That's so funny. After that, back into episodic hijinks, like I said. They had a chapter about trying to get the Switch 2, where it's mostly dialogue-less. Everybody is racing through the mall trying to get one. There's a ton of different parodies that happen as they all unleash their techniques. But like I said, very fast paced, no dialogue, just boom, 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 boom. Really, really good stuff. I think though that it's not accurate, right? There wasn't a Switch 2 shortage. I think they should have just been able to buy one. It's very interesting because like it's a joke that makes sense because we're so used to console shortages at launch, and we're so used to this image of having to go to insane lengths to get your hands on one. But like, I'm pretty sure you can just walk into like any store that sells video games and buy a Switch 2 like right now. I think they actually defeated the shortage this time. Maybe it's different in Japan. But at any rate, I don't think it matters. That's fine. In the Roboco universe, there is a shortage. Then there's a chapter where Kagurabachi is told to be the discipline committee member for their class, and trying to do so, he cycles through a whole bunch of different personalities. Very typical gag comedy shtick. I like it. Then one where Roboco is trying to do driving school. All-time classic gag comedy staple. Just comedy staple in general. Somebody who's bad at driving and wacky stuff is happening. Phenomenal. So classic. Maybe they thought they were getting too high concept with it, so we're bringing it back to just gag comedy staples. Really works for me. Great stuff. And then a very strange one where Roboco is having this dream sequence where she's part of a phantom thief group called Kiss Me. And we spend pretty much the whole chapter, you know, the reveal that it's a dream sequence is right at the end. And all the way up until that point, like, nothing is explained. There's no jokes that reveal that this is abnormal. It's still full of, like, gags and stuff, but it's, like, treated as if we understand what's happening. It's treated as if this has always been the premise of the series, which I really appreciate. It's kind of, like, jarring in a fun way. And the overall feeling I had is that it felt like, you know, they do a lot of parodies of other series in Jump, especially when something is coming to an end. And at first I thought, is this meant to be kind of like a tribute parody for Sid Kraft ending? But it had ended like 2 issues before, and it wasn't really similar to that at all. But it felt like there was like some other non-existent series that they were parodying. Like it had that vibe. And of course they were parodying like tropes in general of like phantom thieves and lurking under the noses of the police and stuff, art heists and all of that, but it felt like weirdly pointed with certain things. I don't know. It was all great though. I really did like that chapter. So yeah, we'll give it an A+ for the month. Still killing it, still holding it down. Chojo is dead. Long live Roboco. Chojo, of course, could not be the next Kochikame, but maybe Roboco could. I could see this running for a long time, man, and that would make me very, very happy. So we'll see. And that's it. Holy cow, what a marathon, man. I think when I stitch together these 2 video files, it's going to be like 3 hours long. Absurd! I'm glad I didn't push to do it all at once. I think I would have died. But yeah, that's as long as these videos will probably get, hopefully, because we had basically 4 additional series, so to speak, because with 4 ending and then 3 new ones starting and then a 4th one next month, we're gonna end up at the balance that we had before this month. But during this transitional month where we got to talk about all the ones that ended and all the ones that started, it's a lot. Here was our tier list last month, with Roboco at the top, One Piece not at the top, Rare Air. This month's tier list, this is as crowded as this slide will ever get. One Piece back on the throne, Nue back in the shit pile. A lot of stuff at A+. That's a great sign. Really, really enjoyed this month of chapters overall. Lots of stuff going out on a boom with good finales, and some that didn't so much. And all of the new series landing squarely in the B to A- range. So it'll be interesting to see how they go from there. Okay, that's it. Whew. See ya.